Hey everyone, tonight we're stepping back into a time when you might not survive until morning. The year is 1348. You're barefoot, half-starved, and tucked into a lumpy sack of straw, listening to wind claw at the wooden shutters. The candle's almost out. The hearth is just a whisper of orange glow. And outside, something is moving. You don't know if it's an animal or a man or something worse. Because in medieval times, night wasn't peaceful. It was a countdown to chaos. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And drop a comment with your location and what time it is where you are. I love seeing how far this sleepy little history channel travels. Now, turn down the lights. Maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise. And let's get started on tonight's journey together. The most boring story to fall asleep. Maybe, but to you, this life is terrifyingly real. You're in a village on the edge of nowhere, surrounded by fog and forest. And tonight you're certain you won't sleep. The interesting history stories people tell today about noble knights and glorious battles don't include what you're feeling now. The cold, creeping dread of being utterly powerless. Because when the sun goes down, the world becomes someone else's. You shuffle closer to your sister, who's already snoring beside you, and pull the scratchy wool blanket over your head. It smells like mildew and smoke. Your skin itches from fleas. You pray the rats stay in the corner tonight. Last week, one bit your cousin's toe while he was dreaming about bread. He woke up bleeding. No one thought it was odd. The wind whistles through the thatched roof, and you hear a distant bell 3 slow tolls. Another death. That's the second one this week. You try not to imagine who it was. You try not to think about the coughing. In the dark, you think of the plague. They call it the pestilence, or God's punishment. No one says the word Black Death, not because it hasn't been invented yet, but because naming things gives them power. You've heard stories. A merchant in a nearby town sneezed once and died the next morning. His family vanished by the end of the week. You saw the priest bless the doors with ash. Your neighbor swears the disease floats through windows on the backs of spirits. You nailed cloth over yours, just in case. Something scratches outside. You freeze. Could be a dog. Or a fox. Could be someone trying to steal your tools again. Last harvest, you caught a boy sneaking into your chicken coop. He looked just like your brother. Maybe it was. No one talks about it. Everyone's too tired, too hungry, too scared to ask questions anymore. This is peasant life, most of it spent waiting. Waiting for morning. Waiting for food. Waiting for sickness or taxes or something even worse. But you're used to it. That's the scariest part. Your mother once told you that night is when the dead remember the living. She said to be quiet after sunset, or the ones who passed might come asking for things, like shoes or names. You whispered a prayer before bed. You're not sure if it's to God or just to the moon. Either way, it didn't work. You're still wide awake. And cold. Always cold. Your breath fogs in the air. You roll toward the fire, but it's down to nothing. No more wood. You used the last of it yesterday, and the forest's off limits now unless you want to find from the Lord's men. Or worse, a beating. You think back to that old man who took 2 branches and got 3 ribs broken. Your stomach growls. That helps take your mind off the scratching. It's strange historians still debate whether medieval peasants were truly afraid of the dark, or just adapted to it. But when you live in it, there's no question. You don't just fear the dark, you fear what the dark lets in: whispers, secrets, regrets, creatures. Last spring, someone said a woman gave birth to a baby with a goat's eyes. They say she made a deal with the spirit at midnight. You laughed when you heard it until you met the woman. She doesn't speak anymore, and her house never has a fire. You shift under the blanket. The flea bites burn worse when you sweat. Maybe that's how it gets in through the skin. No one really knows how the plague spread, and it might, but some nights you think you can feel it crawling. The most interesting history stories might be about kings and crowns, but your story is this: a scratch, a cough, a candle flickering low, and the quiet knowledge that if you die in your sleep, your body might not be found until morning. Even then, it might be buried in a mass pit without your name. You hear the rooster? False alarm, it's too early. But the village will stir now. Someone will check the fire. Someone else will step out to the latrine and mutter a curse at the frost. You're still alive? For now. The scratching stopped. Or maybe it didn't. You just don't care anymore. Tomorrow might be better. Or worse. Doesn't matter. Morning is always a kind of miracle. You close your eyes just a little. The candle's out. 3 tolls and silence. You lie still. Heart thudding. The church bell never rings at this hour unless something's gone very wrong. It echoes across the fields like a bad omen wrapped in fog. You don't breathe. You just listen. 1 toll for a man, 2 for a woman, 3 for a child. You swallow hard. The air feels different now, thicker, like it's holding its breath with you. You remember what happened last time the bell rang like that. 3 tolls, and the next morning, half the village vanished into quarantine. The dead house, they call it. But no one leaves flowers. No one even whispers prayers anymore. You curl your fingers into the straw mattress. It's damp and warm from shared bodies. Someone next to you coughs. It's probably just the smoke from the fire. Probably. There's a saying in your village: if the bell rings after dark, don't open the door. You didn't used to believe in that sort of thing, but now you lock the door. You wedge a broomstick between the handles. You even placed garlic above the lintel. Not for vampires, no one believes in those, but because old Nan said it keeps spirits from slipping under the threshold. You don't question old Nan. She survived 2 plagues and a drunk lord. Besides, it smells better than the latrine. A baby starts crying in the next house over. Thin walls mean shared nightmares. You hear the mother mutter soft, shushing sounds, probably rocking him back and forth, over and over. You've heard stories of babies who didn't make it through the night. Not because of sickness, but because their mothers were too tired, too broken, too terrified. People don't talk about those babies, but you've seen the holes behind the chicken coop. You stare up at the beams above you. Once, a man hanged himself from one of those after his wife died. You were just a kid. You watched them cut him down. His tongue had gone purple. You remember thinking it looked like a plum. You never ate plums again. Now you lie there, stiff, barely blinking, just waiting for the next sound. A scream, a knock, a cough that doesn't stop. It's strange how you can be exhausted and still too scared to sleep. That's peasant life for you. You work until your hands bleed, eat until you're half full, then lie in bed terrified of silence. The death toll is rising. You heard it in the market yesterday. That scribe from 3 towns over gone. So was the tanner's wife. They say she boiled his boots to feed the kids. You do the same, or worse. And there's that farmer whose goats dropped dead all at once. Probably not plague, probably just bad luck. Still, no one's spoken to him since. Even the priest is scared now. You've seen him flinch when someone sneezes. You watched him burn incense until the chapel filled with smoke, thick enough to choke the rats out of hiding. You coughed in there once. People stepped away. Historians still debate whether medieval people understood plague as disease. Some say they blamed bad air. Others thought it was punishment from God. But in your world, it doesn't matter. Truth doesn't stop people from dying. A girl in the next town over said she saw death itself, walking between houses, touching doors. Just a tall figure in a dark cloak. People called her a liar. Then her parents died. No one called her anything after that. You don't want to sleep. Sleep is when the plague comes. You've heard the stories people go to bed fine, wake up with black spots under their arms, and die by nightfall. You've also heard the quieter story, the one no one says out loud, that some don't even wake up at all, that they die dreaming, and that's the kindest death you can hope for. So you stay awake, just in case. Just in case tonight's your turn to wake up coughing. A candle flares to life in the neighbor's window. You see the silhouette of a woman holding it, her arm trembling, her shoulders hunched. Then another shadow joins her. They don't speak. Then the candle goes out. You wonder if she's the one who rang the bell. Outside, something howls. Not a wolf, those are long gone, but a dog. Probably. Or a grieving man. Or a grieving man who sounds like a dog. You've heard both. Neither is easy to forget. You remember when your own brother got sick. It started with a headache, then chills. Then he vomited black stuff onto the dirt floor. You thought he might pull through. He didn't. The worst part wasn't losing him. It was how fast your parents forgot to say his name. You sit up in the dark. Your back aches. You're 17 but feel like 50. You reach for the little cloth bag under your bedding, dried herbs from the healer's daughter. Supposed to protect against fever. They just smell like hay and regret. You hold them anyway. Something about the ritual helps. Pretending you can do something helps. It's not much, but it's all you've got. Then you hear it again, the bell. Just one ring this time. Then silence. The worst kind of silence. You lie back down. You whisper the same prayer you've said for weeks. You don't know if it works. You don't know if anyone listens. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is saying it anyway. Saying it because if you don't, you might lose more than your life. You might lose your hope.
Truth doesn't stop.
You close your eyes. The fire's out. The candle's cold. The scratching has stopped. Tomorrow will come. or it won't. But tonight,
People called her a liar.
you made it to
Then
the
her
end.
Parents died. No one called her
You wake with
anything
a start.
after that. You don't want to
Heart
sleep.
pounding, unsure
Sleep is
why.
when the plague comes.
No
You heard the
bell,
story.
no scream, just a
People go to
sound.
bed fine,
A
wake
quiet
up with
one.
black spots
Scratch,
under their arms,
scratch,
and die
scratch.
by nightfall. You've also heard
You
the
freeze.
quiet story,
It's
though.
coming from the
No
door
one
this
says out
time.
loud. That some don't even
The
wake
sound
up
is
at
too
all.
deliberate to
Then
be
they die
wind.
dreaming, and that's
Too
the
high
kind
pitch
of
for a
theft
dog.
you can hope for. So
It
you
might be a
stay
rat.
awake, just in case.
You hope it's a
Just in
rat.
case tonight's your
But you
turn
know
to
better.
wake up coughing. A candle
You've
flares
lived
to
long
life
enough to
in the
know that the
neighbor's
worst
window.
things
You
don't
see
always
the
make the
silhouette of a
loudest
woman holding in
noises.
her arm,
You don't
trembling,
move,
her
you don't
shoulders
even
hunched.
breathe.
Then another shadow joins her. They
There's
don't
something
speak.
about
Then the
nighttime that
candle
makes
goes out.
ordinary
You
sounds
wonder if
terrifying.
she's the one who rang the bell.
In the daylight,
Outside,
a mouse in the
something
wall is
howls.
just a nuisance.
Not a wolf,
But
though,
at
the
night,
logan,
it
but
becomes a
dog,
monster you can't
probably,
see,
or a grieving
can't
man,
reason with.
or a grieving man
Your
who
brain
sounds
fills
like
in
a
the dark with
dog.
its
You
own
heard
horrors.
both. Neither
You
is
glance at
easy
the
to
door.
forget. You remember
There's no
when your
lock,
own
just a
brother
wooden
got
latch,
sick.
and the
Started
broomstick
with a
wedged
headache,
across it.
then chill.
Anyone desperate
Then he
enough could kick
vomited
it
black
in.
stuff onto the dirt floor.
That's
You
happened
thought he might
before.
pull through. He didn't. The
Remember
worst
the
part
miller.
wasn't losing
He went
him.
out to
He was
relieve
out
himself
fast
and
your
came back
parents
to
forgot
find his
say
house
name.
ransacked.
You sit up in the dark.
Took
Your
his
back
tools,
aches.
his
You're
bread,
17, but
and his
you're like
wife's only
50.
blanket.
You reach for the little cloth bag
She froze
under
2
your bed
nights
and
later.
dried herbs from the healer's
That was during the
daughter.
last
Supposed to
frost.
protect against fever. They just
You
smell
remember
like
her hands
hay
blue,
and regret.
like the sky
You
just
hold them
before
anyway.
morning?
Something about the ritual helps.
Most people think
Pretending
medieval
you
nights
can
were
do
quiet,
something helps.
peaceful,
It's not much,
maybe even
but it's all
boring.
you've got. Then you hear it
Perfect
again,
for
the
sleep.
bell.
The
Just
most
one
boring
ring this
story to
time.
fall asleep.
Then silence.
Sure, if you leave
The
out the
worst
fear,
kind of silence.
the whispers,
You lie back down.
the scratching.
You whisper the same prayer you've said
If
for
you forget
weeks.
that no
You
one was
don't know
ever
if it
really
worked.
alone,
You don't know
you
if
share your
anyone
bed with
listened.
3
But
people.
Maybe that's not the point.
A family
Maybe
of
the point
lice,
is saying it anyway.
and the
Say
constant
it,
dread
because
of
if
being
you
robbed in
don't,
your sleep.
you might lose more than your
No
life.
one owns
You
much,
might
but that's
lose
the
your
problem.
hope. You
When
close
people
your
are starving,
eyes. The
they'll
fire's
kill you
out.
for less than a
The
loaf of
candle's
bread.
cold. The scratching has stopped.
You pull the
Tomorrow
blanket
will
tighter.
come, or it won't.
The cold is biting
But
tonight.
tonight,
You
made
feel it
to
in your
the
teeth,
end.
your
It
knees,
wasn't
even
the
in your
stolen
spine.
hug that hurt me,
The
Doc.
straw
It was a
mattress
text
rustles.
message. I still think of you.
Your little
Even
brother
when I'm
shifts,
with my wife. I read
mutters
it one
something in
morning
his
earlier
sleep.
this week after David
You
had
envy
gone
him.
to work, and I was clearing out
He's
some
too
old
young to
equipment
understand
in
what the
shed.
scratching
It was
means.
the laptop he'd used 3 years
Too
ago,
young to
which
remember
no
the
longer
night the
worked
Reeves
smoothly.
men
It was
came
now in
through.
storage, but I wanted to clear out some
They were
stuff,
supposed to collect
because every time I
taxes,
opened the shed door,
but
I
they
felt
didn't stop there.
claustrophobic.
They
Just
kicked in
like my
doors,
life right
dragged
now.
people
I
out,
decided to wipe
beat
the
an old
data
man for
and take
refusing
the
to hand
machine
over
to a
his
local
last sack of oats.
electronics recycler,
You watched it
but when
happen
I turned it on, the screen displayed
through a
slight
crack in the
errors,
wall,
then automatically opened an
silent,
old Google Drive folder that had been
still.
synced from David's account, and inside
Historians
there was a
still
file
debate whether
with no
common folk in
name,
medieval
just a
times had
string of
anything
dates,
like privacy.
2023
The answer, if you ask anyone
28.
alive back then,
I wasn't looking for
is
it,
no.
but there it was.
Not even in your own home.
And I clicked on it.
Especially not at
Inside
night.
was a backup of a
People could come
conversation,
in,
hundreds of lines long.
take what they
I don't know
wanted,
why
and
David
leave
said
without
maybe
consequences.
He accidentally turned on
Lords
automatic
wouldn't care.
backups. But what
The
I
church
saw
might
was
look the other way.
fragments of a clear,
The Reeve would shrug
undeniably
unless it was
illicit
his
affair.
house.
The woman was named Tuesday.
That's
I
why
didn't
you
know
hide
her
your bread
real
in the
name,
chimney.
but the nickname
Why
sounded
you wrap your
beautiful and
only coin in
suggestive
sheep's wool and
completely
bury
out
it
of
under the
place in
chicken
world of a
hutch?
50-year-old man
You
with a
trust
wife and a
chickens
child
more
about
than
to start
neighbors.
college.
The
I
scratching
wish last night
stops.
had been longer. I can't take
Now
my
that's
eyes
worse,
off you.
because
Even though
silence
my
always
wife is
means a
sitting right
decision
next
was
to me.
made.
When you wore that red dress,
You strain your
I couldn't
ears.
breathe.
Nothing.
I read every line.
Not even
Every
wind.
word, as if reading a
Not even
verdict on my
breath.
own
Then a
life.
soft
I
thud.
didn't scream. I didn't
Not
smash the
loud.
computer. I just sat
Just enough to
there
confirm it
in the
wasn't your
dim light of the
imagination.
warehouse, clutching the wireless mouse.
Someone
My
stepped away
eyes
from the
burning,
door,
but not a drop
or
of
toward the
water coming
window.
out. I had suspected. I
You
had
sit up
felt.
now,
I had a hunch.
quietly.
But the feeling of facing the
You
truth
nudge
was
your
no
brother.
less. It was
He
like a
groans
punch
but
to
doesn't
the
wake.
chest, but it
You wish you
didn't
had
leave a
something,
bruise,
anything to
but a
protect yourself.
cold void,
A blade,
stretching from
a
my
stick,
neck down to my
even a
lower
loud voice.
abdomen. I printed out
But
the
your
check
father is
The
gone,
full text,
and your
not
mother is
because I
asleep in the
wanted to
next room.
confront him. But because I needed
If it's a
confirmation that I
thief,
wasn't crazy,
all you can
that
do
I
is
wasn't
pray they're
imagining
too
things,
tired to
that
bother
this
with your
truth
house.
Existed. I dove back to recent
Think about the
conversations
walls.
I
They're
had
just
with Davy
wattle and
Shalom,
daub,
lackluster,
mud and sticks.
seemingly innocuous
You once poked a
phrases
hole
like,
through
"Don't
one with
wait
your
for me for
finger.
dinner," or, "I
If
am
someone
on a
wanted
business
in,
trip, now
they'd find a
playing in my
way.
head."
But
Like
you
the
also think about the
soundtrack to a play
dogs.
of lies.
Not
It
yours,
started
you
to
can't afford
cold.
one, but the
My
neighbors.
best friend Monique, who
They
stewed
bark
the
at
Calvary
anything
book,
after
didn't
dark.
stop. I knew what she would say.
They're not barking
You have
now.
to talk to
That's
him.
worse
But
than
I
the
didn't want to say
scratching.
anything. I felt caught between
Suddenly,
two
there's a
worlds.
voice.
The hurt
Not
one who
outside,
wanted to scream, and the woman who
inside,
suddenly felt strangely
somewhere in the
powerful.
dark corner
That
of the
night, I
room.
cooked dinner as
You
usual.
freeze again.
David came home at 8 saying
But
he
it's
was
just
stuck
your
in
grandmother.
traffic from the conference. I nodded
She's
and
talking in
invited
her
him to sit
sleep,
at the table. I looked him
muttering in the
straight
old
the eye
tongue
as
she
I placed
refuses
the
to stop
plate in front of him.
using.
He avoided my gaze and turned to his
You
son,
can't
who
make
had
out the
skipped
words.
that practice test.
You're not
Nothing
even sure she's
special.
saying anything real.
Nothing broke. No
But the
one
tone is
cried. No one left.
strange.
But inside me,
Sad,
everything was broken.
scared,
And strangely enough, I no longer
like she's
wanted to
telling
make
a
him
secret
regret.
to the
I no longer
shadows.
wanted to see him
She does
begging
this
for
sometimes.
forgiveness or standing at
And
my
every
door
time she
begging
does,
for a
someone
chance.
in the village
What I
dies.
wanted was to get myself back.
You stare at the
I
ceiling.
opened my laptop
There's
in
a hole in
middle
the
of
thatch,
night,
small,
not to write an email
but
questioning
big
David,
enough to see
but to open a
stars.
blank document. I named a
You
file
look through it
trader and
now,
typed the first line.
wishing you
He
could
had
just
no idea
float
he was
out,
going to be the main
away from the
character in
cold.
story. A
The
story
scratching,
where the readers would hate him,
the
pity
death
him,
bells,
and no one would remember the
the
third
silence.
person's name. My hand shook as I
That's
typed,
the dream.
but not because I was angry. Because
Right.
for the first time in
That's the
years,
fantasy in
I
all
felt
these
like I
interesting
had a
history
voice.
stories
I didn't
escape.
shout, but my
Knights,
words would
quests,
carry farther than any
adventures, but you don't have a
conversation.
horse.
I wouldn't retaliate.
You don't even have
but I would
shoes.
tell every detail.
You have a
Every
burlap
action,
shirt,
every
a
sentence
sick
David
brother,
thought no one would
and a
remember.
roof
I
that
closed
leaks.
the file, saved it to a
And
separate
right
hard
now,
drive, and set a
you have
password.
something
It felt
or
like something
someone
inside
just
me had
outside your
risen, not
wall,
anger, but the
deciding if
stuff I had
tonight is the
buried in
night
the
they come
family
inside.
dinners, the
Your breath
laundry,
fogs
the early
again.
morning kiss. I don't know how
You
far
lie
I'll
back
go.
down,
I just know
slowly,
I won't sit still any longer.
carefully.
If it were you, what would you do?
You don't
if
want to
you
make a
knew that
sound.
the person you trusted
Your
the
heart is
most had
hammering like a
betrayed you in
drum.
silence? Do you
You
choose
try to
stay
focus on
silent,
something else.
confront,
You remember a
or
joke the Tanner told
write
last
it all
week.
down?
What's the difference
Please share
between
your
a peasant
thoughts in
and
the
a
comment
candle?
section below for
You
everyone
waited.
to share.
One
I
gets
didn't
snuffed
throw a
out on
glass at him.
purpose.
I threw chapters of a book straight
No one
at his
laughed.
honor.
Still, the
Tonight
memory
I opened
helps.
my laptop again
A
and
little.
typed those first lines. I have not
You
been
close
the
your
one who
eyes
sat
just for a
quietly
second,
by the window waiting
just to
for her
blink.
husband to come
And when you
home.
open them,
I have
the
stayed up
fire's
later,
out.
woken up earlier. I
And the
set
scratching
alarm for when David
is
and the
back.
kids were out of the house.
You don't know how
Made
long the
coffee
scratching
as
has been going on
usual,
this time.
and sat down at the kitchen table
Could
where
be
I used to
minutes.
fold papers to
Could
grade
be an
my
hour.
son. Suzanne
In the
began
dark.
to write. I didn't have
Time
any
bends like
specific
warped wood.
plans,
Nothing
no
is straight.
outlines
Nothing
or
is certain.
storyboards
You
like
wish
I
the candle
did
was
when
still
I was
burning,
working for a literary
even if just a
magazine.
stub,
I just wrote as
but
if
it's
blood
gone,
was flowing from my
and the
hand.
coals are black.
Each line I typed was like a
The room is
small,
silent, except for the
sharp
occasional
knife
rustle
stabbing
of
into an
bodies
old
shifting,
wound I had been hiding.
snoring,
But instead of
murmuring in
causing more
sleep,
pain, it
and
made
that
me
scratch,
feel lighter, because
slow,
finally I was no longer
deliberate,
silent. My
like
main
fingernails on
character's a
damp wood.
successful man who works in the government.
You tell
They
yourself
said,
it's
of
Nanimal
course,
again,
anyone close to me
but deep
knows
down,
that David is
you
the
know it
original.
isn't.
I haven't changed much. He
Because
also
you
lives in a
remember this
two-story
feeling,
house in the suburbs
that
of
specific
Vancouver.
weight
As
in
a
your
wife who
chest.
gave up her writing
You
career to
felt
raise
it
a
last
family,
harvest
and
when the
has an
Lord's
affair
men
with a
rode into the
woman
village
nearly
after
20 years
sunset.
younger than him,
The riders didn't
named
knock.
Tuesday. I didn't need to imagine
They didn't
it.
have
I
to.
just needed to
They
tell
kicked
it,
in
but
3
I told it
doors.
in my own way.
Yours
In the
wasn't one of
story,
them.
Daniel not
Not
only
that
betrayed
time.
his wife, but also
But you heard
stole
it
her
all,
credit,
boots on
taking
dirt,
an award
sobbing.
for a project that was
Something heavy
actually
dragging across the
hers. I
floor.
made him an ambitious,
The next morning,
hypocritical
your neighbors were
man
gone.
who always talked
No
about
explanations,
family ethics in public,
no
but sent
priest,
sex messages
no
behind his
prayers,
wife's
just
back every night. I need not
gone.
embellish. The truth is
You still
dramatic
remember
enough
the
to be
muddy
written. I
handprint
posted
on
a
their
short
door?
piece online
No one wiped
on
it
an
off.
anonymous writers forum. I didn't use
People
my
think
real
medieval
name. I
lords
went by
ruled
the
from
pen name
faraway
CEO
castles,
short for Clara Benoit,
too
a
preoccupied
north
with
as in the
tournaments
cold
and
north,
wars to notice
where I'd been
peasants.
frozen for so long.
That
Within
might
a
be
day,
true for
the
some,
snippet I posted at hundreds of views.
But your Lord,
Other
he's
anonymous
nearby
readers started leaving comments.
and
I feel like
bored.
you're writing for me.
That's the worst
Please
combination.
continue.
His steward is worse. A pale man with a toothless smile and a whip that never sleeps. The steward claims to speak with God. You think he just enjoys cruelty. And at night, they test your fear like children poking frogs. Historians still debate whether feudal enforcement was as brutal as the stories suggest. But there's no debate in your mind, not when you've seen your cousin with bruises in the shape of a boot. Not when you saw the steward tie a man to a cartwheel and leave him overnight to think. He never stood straight again. The scratch stops. Then comes a sound much worse: footsteps. Not loud ones. Careful ones. Soft. Almost respectful. Whoever's out there is taking their time. That's what makes it worse. This isn't someone desperate. This is someone comfortable. Someone who knows you won't fight back. You consider waking your mother, but she needs sleep. And if this is what you think it is, if it's one of them, then there's nothing she can do. So you lie still, and you pray. Again, you're getting good at it, though you're not sure anyone's listening. The door creaks slightly. Just pressure. Maybe from the wind. Maybe from a hand. You hope it's the wind, but that's like hoping water will make you wet. Suddenly, a voice. Tax records, it says muffled through the wood. Flat. Unbothered. You don't answer. You owe half a sack of barley. The voice continues. Do 2 days past? Still, you say nothing. You don't have barley. You barely have bread. There's a pause. You imagine him tilting his head, disappointed, already considering punishment. You wonder if he has the whip, or worse, in order to take something else. And then, nothing. No more talking, no kicking, no breaking, just fading footsteps. He's not done with you. Not tonight. Just taking notes. Like a crow picking which lamb to snatch next. You exhale slowly, realizing you hadn't breathed since he spoke. You think of the last time they took something. Your neighbor, Ruth, had a spinning wheel. She used it at night by the fire to make wool socks. One day, a man in a black cloak came and said it wasn't hers, that it was unregistered property. He took it, said she could buy it back. She never did. She died last winter with frostbite on both feet. You pull your own blanket tighter. It's thin, patched 6 times, stiff with old sweat and ash, but it's yours. For now, your little brother stirs again. He always sleeps through the bad stuff. One day, he'll be old enough to understand why you keep a rock under your mattress, not for building, not for trading, just for throwing. Outside, you hear the hoot of an owl. That's good luck. Supposedly, or bad, you can't remember. Every old saying contradicts another. Owls mean wisdom, or death. Depends who you ask. You don't care anymore. If it flies and doesn't scratch at your door, it's a friend. The most interesting history stories never tell you what it's like to be powerless in your own home. To know that the night doesn't belong to you, not really. It belongs to the ones who make the rules and rewrite them as they please. You tried to resist once. When you were younger, you shouted at a guard who took your father's axe. He smiled. Then he handed you a stick and said, "Here, be a man." You didn't shout after that. You lie there counting breaths, listening, waiting. You hear nothing now. Not the scratching, not the steward, not even the wind.
without drama.
And that's the
but enough
most
to bury
dangerous
his
moment
fake
of all.
calm. However,
Because
I know
silence,
the
true
mask
silence,
cannot last forever.
always
It
means
all
someone got
started
what they
when
came
David's
for.
longtime friend Roger came over,
You stay awake
a
until you
jovial,
see the faintest
slightly
gray
loud
light crawling through the
man who worked
thatch.
in textbook
A new
publishing.
day,
He read women's
or what
literature to
passes for
understand
one.
his wife better. He flipped through a few
You're not
pages
sure
of
you
a book I'd
slept.
left on the table and stopped
You're
reading.
not sure you
Clara,
dreamed.
did you
You
write
only
this?
know that you're
I was a
still
little
here.
startled, but
And so is the
remained
door.
calm. Yeah, just a
But tomorrow
personal
night,
project.
it might open.
It's single
You wake up
quotes.
with someone's
S.
foot in your face.
Dot,
Your little
good.
sister has sprawled
The way
sideways
you
across the
describe
mattress
the
again.
character's psychology
Her
is
toes are ice
perfect.
cold
I
and
mean
smell
it.
like the
Then he
turnip
looked at
mash
me
you
with a
had 3 nights
half-pleased and
ago.
half-doubting look. But
You push her
the
gently.
male lead, I feel familiar.
She snorts and rolls
I
over,
smile gently.
muttering
Maybe
something
because
about
out
goats in
there,
her
there are
dream.
a ton of people like him. David
You
didn't say
stretch,
anything during the conversation,
or try
but
to.
I knew he heard every word.
Your neck cracks
That
like
night, he
firewood.
didn't go straight
Your
to
back
bed.
feels like
After
you
his
slept on a
son went
pile of
upstairs,
rocks, which,
he sat in the living room,
to
pretending
be
to watch
fair,
the
you
news.
kinda did.
I poured tea
The
for
straw
myself,
mattress has long
then
since
for
flattened,
him. Are you
and
writing a
every other
story
stalk
about
seems
me?
to have
His
turned into a
voice wasn't
splinter.
harsh. It was
This
like
is
a man
bedtime
who
in a
had just
peasant's
seen his
world,
back
one
in the
room.
mirror for the first time
One
in
bed,
years, and
8
didn't
limbs
recognize
tangled in
himself.
exhaustion and
I
body
wrote
heat,
about a man whose
and
wife
if you're
thought he
lucky,
wasn't good enough
no one
until
wet
she realized
themselves.
he was the mediocre one. Are you
People
trying
like to
embarrass
imagine that
me?
old-timey
I laughed.
life was
For the first
romantic,
time in weeks.
rustic,
David, you don't have to try.
quaint,
I do it every day.
a fireplace
It's just that
crackling,
no one writes it
a
down.
feather bed,
He was
a
silent.
soft candle
His eyes
glow.
hardened.
Nope.
For the first time, I sensed David
You
was
share your sleeping space
afraid.
with 2 siblings.
Not afraid of me,
Your
but
mother,
afraid of the truth.
your grandmother,
When it is no longer
a
in
dozen
your
fleas,
hands. A week later,
and
he
maybe
was
the ghost of a
rummaging through my
chicken that died in the
drawers.
wall last
I
spring.
knew it wasn't because I set him up.
The walls
It
are
was because
thin,
he was so clumsy.
the mattress
I
is
always
communal,
kept the manuscript on the
and the
bottom,
concept
but
of personal
now
space won't be
his
invented
crooked
for
edges
another
clearly
700
curled up,
years.
and he
You
started
sit
to
up
change.
slowly,
He came home
scratching
early.
at
He
your
left his
scalp.
phone on the kitchen table,
Something
screen facing
moves.
up. He asked me
You
how
squint
many
down
words
and
did you
spot
write
a
today,
louse
and
crawling along your
occasionally reminded
collarbone
me
like
to
it
eat
owns the
a
place.
clumsy performance. A
You
roll
flick it off with a
without
sigh.
promise. And I watched him like a screenwriter.
You don't even react
silently
anymore.
observing an actor
That's just bedtime
misrepresenting a character's
ambiance.
emotions.
Your mother is
I
already up,
didn't respond.
wrapping cloth around her
Kept
cracked
right
feet.
as the release date approached.
She glances
I
at
felt
you.
like I was about to remove a tumor
You were
that had
grinding
been
your
pressing
teeth
on my
again,
heart
she
for
says.
years. No surgery, no blood.
That makes sense.
Just
You've been
words.
dreaming about
Publisher
food.
sent out the first
Historians still
promotional
debate
poster.
whether
A
peasant
photo
sleep
with a
patterns were
prominent
truly
quote.
fragmented.
I didn't kill him in the story.
Some say
I
folks
never
slept in
lied.
2
With
shifts,
the
first sleep and
truth
second
about
sleep with a
himself.
period of
I posted
wakefulness
it
in
on the bulletin
between.
board in my office, and I
Others
let
say that's
David
just
see
what
it that
happens when your
night.
house
He
is a
was
noisy,
angry.
itchy,
You are
cold mess,
defaming me.
and you
I
have to
looked
share
up
it with
from my
5
desk,
people
not
and a goose.
surprised. I didn't call your name.
Either way,
I
you didn't sleep
write about
well.
real events.
Again.
I
You
just
glance
wrote
around the room.
feelings of a wife who was once
Your little brother
considered
is still
shadow,
snoring.
But everyone will understand.
Grandma's
it's you.
whispering to herself
Only
in the
those
corner,
who have seen you
probably
like that will
telling
think
riddles to her
so.
shadow friends
David,
again.
It's not me.
There's a
Threw
smell.
the poster on the floor. His
You
face
hope
red.
it's from
What do you
outside.
want? Fame, money. Or do
You
wanna
hope
make me lose
wrong.
face? I stood up quietly.
You crawl
walked
toward the fire
closer,
pit,
and looked
poke the
straight
ashes.
into his eyes.
Cold.
I want
You
my
should get more
silence for
wood.
18 years
But you
to
know
have
what's
an
out
echo.
there.
I want all the times I swallowed
You
my
remember
tears
when you
during
first
dinner.
got moved to the
nights I
big
turned my
family
back, not
mattress.
because of anger, but because of
It was after your
exhaustion.
father
The
died.
compliments I gave you when
The
I had
cot by the
nothing
door
left
had
to
been
believe
his.
in, to be written down,
You used to hear him
so that I
snore
am
like
not
a
the only
lion
one who
steady,
remembers. He looked at me as if he
loud,
recognized me in
comforting.
front of him, but that was the problem. He
Now
had
there's
never
just
really
an old
seen
coat
me
there,
until I put
folded
myself
over
in
a
the
broken
book.
bench.
The
Your
confrontation
mother
ended
cried the
not with
first night you all
forgiveness,
slept
nor
together.
with an argument,
You didn't
but
know
with
why at the time.
silence. David
Now you
withdrew,
do.
and I found myself for the first time.
You watch as she
stepping out of
stirs
his
something in
shadow.
the pot
When
over the
truth
rekindled
comes out,
coals.
who is really
It's not
scared?
breakfast.
The one who
It's just
spoke
water
out,
and
or the
dried
one who
herbs.
thought it would stay hidden? How long
Maybe
have you
later
kept
she'll
quiet?
find a
Just
carrot.
because you thought you would be
Or
called
the memory of
selfish
one.
if you spoke
Your
up.
sister
Leave a
burps in her
comment if
sleep.
you've ever taken back control of your story.
Your
And
brother
don't
kicks you
forget to
again.
subscribe,
You consider
because
getting up for the
Clara
day.
has one
But what's the
final
point?
chapter left, where true freedom
It's still dark.
begins.
There's a knock at the
Give him
wall.
the story. I let him live
Not a
with the
door,
truth about
a
himself.
wall.
April came earlier than
That'll be
usual.
Lisa,
Winter in Vancouver
the neighbor
is
girl.
not long, but
She
this
taps
year,
once when she
the
wants to
cold
trade
lingered as
usually
if it wanted to
gossip,
hold me a little
sometimes
longer,
firewood,
like an old habit that
occasionally a
didn't
riddle.
wanna leave. But I was
You
different.
tap back.
I was ready.
Twice?
novel was
That's the
published
code for
on my
too tired.
birthday. For the first
Come back
time in
later.
years, I didn't celebrate
She
my
taps again
birthday in my
anyway.
kitchen with a
You
cake
sigh
from my
and crawl
local
to the
bakery,
panel.
dinner with David and my son.
You press your
and a
ear to the
few
cold
perfunctory
wattle and
greetings.
daub.
This
What
year,
you whisper.
I celebrated my
They're
birthday in
digging,
Montreal,
she whispers back.
where I grew up.
By the
where I
well.
dreamed of becoming a writer.
You
And now,
blink.
where
Digging
I'm
what?
starting over,
She pauses.
I stepped onto the
A hole?
small stage of a
Big one.
literary
Someone must
discussion
have
at the
died.
Mountain Delight, holding a microphone
You
with
groan.
hands
Was it
that
the
had been
Potter?
shaking with
No, she
pain,
says,
but were
Potter
now
died last week.
sure of my
Keep up.
decision. In the rows of seats
You
were
thank her
hundreds of
and
eyes.
crawl back
There were
to
young
bed.
people, old people,
You forgot how
and even
fast
women
death
my
travels
age.
here.
Eyes that were both
Blink
tired
and the
and
whole
bright and
village
hopeful.
rearranges
I tell the
itself.
story as an
You lie
off-and-on
back down.
blogger, a protagonist.
Head on your
I
arm
don't
and stare at the
mention David by
ceiling.
name. I don't give
Your
any
sister mumbles
identifying
something about
details. I
frogs.
just talk about silence,
The louse is
about
back,
how women can
doing
turn
laps
their
on your ankle.
vulnerability into a new language. And I say
This is
I
what
was
bedtime
afraid to
looks like.
say.
5 bodies
Writing doesn't
packed
change
like
him.
smoked fish.
Writing doesn't earn me
Air
an
thick with
apology.
breath and
Writing
ash.
makes me no longer
The
needed.
occasional
The
giggle or
applause was
groan.
not loud, but
You could write a
sincere.
symphony from the
Like
nighttime
sound of
noises
the
alone,
wind blowing
snoring,
across St. Marie Lake
coughing,
every
farting,
afternoon.
muttering,
Quiet, but making
scratching.
leaves fall, making
And
my heart
that's just the
change
humans.
seasons. I
Once
moved
a
into
neighbor
a
tried to
small
sleep outside for
apartment in
fresh air.
Quebec, near an
He
independent
came back
bookstore
covered in
and a
bug
cafe.
bites
I
and
rented
smelling
it
like
with a
wet
book
moss.
advance. Not a
His wife
lot,
wouldn't let him
but
near the
enough
bed
to
for a
cover
week.
my expenses. No one knew who
You
I was
envy him.
here. I was
There's a
seeking
weird
no
comfort in the
domain that had
chaos.
nothing to do with my
You know
wife,
everyone's
Clara
rhythm, how
Benoit,
grandma
who used to
hums when
live in
she's drifting
Vancouver.
off.
I was starting over.
How your mother
No
coughs
hate,
once before
no
finally
need for
falling
anyone to
asleep.
see, just to
How
see
your sister
myself in the
mumbles
mirror and
nonsense
not
like
feel
she's talking to
strange.
elves.
David called after 2 weeks of no contact.
Even the louse
He didn't
has a
ask,
schedule,
"Where are
apparently.
He
You
asked,
curl up
"Why
again,
don't you let me have the last
knees to
word?"
chest,
I replied
trying to
with a
find the
quote
least
from the
itchy
novel
spot on the
itself.
mattress.
Traitors always think they deserve
It's not
to be
much,
justified.
but it's home.
Sometimes silence is the most
And even if you
accurate
don't sleep
sentence.
deeply,
I didn't hang up.
at least you're not alone.
Then hung up.
Not now, not ever.
Once, I wasn't the one waiting for it
That's
to
just
end.
how it is in the
My
day.
son, now
You share
17,
labor.
FaceTimes
In the
me
night,
every
you share
weekend.
dreams
He knows
and body
everything
heat
without me telling
and
him.
fleas.
Children
You
always
close
know
your
more than
eyes.
we think. You seem
The
more
fire
like we
pops.
used to.
Your sister
He told
elbows
me.
you in the
I
ribs.
laughed, tears falling.
A louse
I
dives
hung
into
up,
your
but
eyebrow
they
like
weren't
it's clocking
painful
in for the
anymore.
night
They
shift.
were tears
And
of
somehow,
relief.
through
I
all of
wrote a
that, as you
second
start to
book.
drift,
Not a revenge novel. A
not to
diary.
peace,
I
but
told
to
the
sleep.
story of my journey to self-discovery through
It starts with a
words.
groan.
Publisher agreed
You're
to
not
print
sure if it comes
inside
from your
of a
dream or the
Clara
village
Benoit
square.
said,
But
"You should
either way,
stand in
it
the
pulls you
spotlight
up from
with your
whatever
own
half
name.
sleep you
I
manage to
agreed
find
not
between
to
your
be
sisters
famous,
kicking
but to a
and the
father,
rat
I'm
chewing
back.
something near the
I'm
hearth.
still me and more.
Then you
I
hear it
get
again.
hundreds of letters from
A
readers,
low,
mostly
muffled
women.
sound.
They tell me about
Painful.
nights spent sitting on
Human.
chairs on the balcony.
You sit up.
About text messages
The window
they've
slits are
seen,
still dark,
about dinners
but
with
there's a
only
faint
one
flicker of
person
torchlight
drinking,
outside,
about
unusual
parts
this
of their
early.
lives they thought they couldn't
You
survive,
crawl over your
but
sleeping
now they're
brother,
living.
who mumbles
They
in
read my
protest
books,
and shuffle
they
barefoot
write
to the
their own
door.
stories. One person wrote,
You lift the latch
"I
gently.
didn't
Cold air
commit
hits you in the chest
suicide."
like a slap.
Chapter 4 of your book.
But that's not what
Another,
makes your stomach
I filed
twist.
for divorce right after reading the
It's
last
the
page.
sound.
I
A
don't
wet,
know if I deserve that
gagging
gratitude,
sort of
but I
cry,
do know that the book didn't
followed by
save
the
me.
rhythmic
They
creak
saved
creak
me.
of wood
I'm just
against
a
wood.
reminder. You can start over.
Someone's been left in the
And you
stocks
don't
again.
need to wait for
The
anyone's
stocks sit in the
permission.
village
One
square,
day, in early
right
June,
between the well and the
the sun was
chapel.
just beginning to
You
rise
hate
in
walking
Quebec.
past
I
them.
received an anonymous
Even when they're
package.
empty,
Inside was my book
they give
signed
off
by
a smell
Rita
of
Rand, a
old
small,
sweat,
handwritten note.
sour
I
breath,
read the last
and
chapter.
humiliation.
Now I understand why you don't need an apology.
But when they're full,
I
well,
folded the note,
you
leaving
squint
no
toward the
message.
square
I
now.
made a pot of chamomile
There's someone
tea,
slumped
opened
forward in the
window,
device,
and let the sunlight
their
flood
head
the
and
room.
arms
In that
locked through
moment,
wooden
I didn't think
holes,
about David.
bare
I didn't
feet
think about
exposed to the
betrayal.
cold,
I didn't think about what I
clothes
had
soaked
lost.
through from the early
I only
morning
thought
frost.
about one thing. I rewrote my
You recognize
life.
the
The
outline.
very words
It's
I had
Thomas,
forgotten. Have
the
you
Cooper's
ever felt
boy.
freedom come not from someone
He's
else,
only
but
12.
from your
People
own?
think medieval
Final
punishment was
decision.
all
Do
public
you have an
beatings and
untold
fiery
story?
executions.
If so,
But
might
the
be
truth
time to
is,
write it
the
down.
most common
Share what
sentence was shame, and shame didn't keep office hours.
Journey resonates with you.
If you got sentenced at sunset, you stayed locked up until morning. It didn't matter how cold it got. Didn't matter if you were young or sick. The night was part of the punishment. And worse, it wasn't just a sentence for your crime. It was a performance for everyone else's bedtime. Historians still debate whether these punishments were meant to correct behavior or reinforce hierarchy. But as you step outside and watch Thomas's breath form a shaky clouds in the air, it doesn't feel like either. It feels like cruelty dressed up as justice. And it always happens at night. You shuffle closer. It's wrapped tight. A few other are awake now. Neighbors stepping onto porches, curious or just nosy. Lisa is already there, holding a tiny lantern. She looks at you and frowns. Stealing grain, she says quietly. You blink. What grain? She shrugs. Does it matter? No, it doesn't. You remember when your uncle got put in the stocks for cursing a tax collector? He lost 3 toes by morning. Frostbite. But the steward said it was God's will. Convenient. How the will of God always aligns with the whims of men in nice boots. You look back at Thomas. His feet are already turning blue. You think about bringing him a blanket. But you also think about what happened to Marta when she tried that last year. She got whipped twice. Once for interfering with discipline, and once for disrespecting the law. They say it was her fault for not asking permission first. So you do nothing, because what can you do? You're a peasant in a world where silence is safer than kindness. You turn away and head back inside. The warmth hits you hard even if there's not much of it. Your sister is now sideways across the bed again. She's drooling on the corner of the blanket.
And strangest of all,
Grandma's still whispering. Your mother stirs and looks at you. Who is it this time? She asks. Voice hoarse. Thomas, you say. She doesn't even blink. Just pulls the blanket tighter and says, poor boy, before turning over. And that's how it is. Pity is brief, sleep is scarce, and nighttime isn't a refuge, it's just more of the same, without the distraction of sunlight. You lie down again, but you can't close your eyes. Not yet. Because now you're thinking about the stocks, about how they were built during a harvest festival years ago. Painted bright red by the steward's orders. Supposed to be a reminder of order, they were used for the first time the very next day. You remember that too. It was your father.
I said nothing.
He had argued over a pig, claimed it was his. The steward claimed otherwise. Your father was right. Everyone knew it. Didn't matter. He was in the stocks before the sun set. And your mother wouldn't speak for a week after. You were 7.
I sat on the balcony.
You still dream about it sometimes. The shame. The flies. The way people tried not to look as they walked past. Except the children. They always looked. They threw pebbles. You roll to your side. Your sister mumbles something about ducks. A flea jumps from your elbow to your shoulder. You don't swat it. Not worth the effort. You whisper a quiet sorry to no one in particular. Sorry to Thomas. Sorry to your father. Sorry to yourself for still being scared. The most boring story to fall asleep, maybe to someone who's never smelled frostbite or watched a boy cry because his fingers are too numb to feel the rats nibbling at his shoes. But to you, this is the story. Nighttime doesn't forgive. It doesn't forget. It just lingers waiting for the next neck to lock in the wood. You drift off eventually. And in your dream, you're in the stocks. Not for stealing, not for fighting,
Hey everyone, tonight we're stepping back
just for
into a
being
time
poor.
when you might not
And no one
survive
looks you in the
until
eye.
morning. The year is
You wake to the
3048.
sound of
You're
howling,
barefoot,
not the eerie,
half
far-off
starved,
kind that
and
makes your
tucked
skin
into a
crawl
lumpy
gently.
sack of straw.
This is the
Listening
sharp,
to wind
immediate kind, the
call
one that
as the
jabs you
wooden
straight in the
shutter.
gut
The
before your
candle's
eyes are
almost out.
even
The
open.
hearth is just a whisper of orange glow.
At first,
And
it doesn't
outside,
register.
something is moving.
Your dream
You
had
don't
something
know
to
if
do
it's
with
an animal
meat,
or a man
actual
or
meat,
something worse.
not
Because
turnip
in
stew
medieval
pretending to be
times,
meat, and you
night
think maybe
wasn't
the sound is
peaceful.
just a
It was a
dog
countdown
trying to
to
join in.
chaos. So,
Then you sit up,
before you get comfortable,
and you know,
take a moment to like
that's
the
not a
video and
dog.
subscribe, but only if you
That's
really
the
like
woods
what
calling.
I do here.
And that's
drop a
never good.
comment with your location and what time
The
it
woods
is
have
where
always
you
been a
are.
boundary,
I love seeing
not just
how
in the
far this
obvious way they
sleepy
mark the
little
edge of your
History Channel
village,
travels.
the end
Now,
of farmland,
turn down the lights,
the beginning of
maybe
don't
turn
go
on the
there.
fan for some
But deeper than
soothing
that,
noise. And
they
let's get
represent
started on
something
tonight's
wild and
journey together.
unknowable.
The most
In the
boring
day, they're a
story
place to
fall
gather
asleep.
firewood.
Maybe.
At
But to
night,
you,
they become a
this
mouth
life
that
is
eats the desperate and the
terrifyingly
dumb.
real. You're in a village on the edge of nowhere.
And tonight,
surrounded by
something
fog
inside
and
that mouth
forest.
is howling.
And tonight you're
You creep to
certain
the
you
window
won't
slit.
sleep. The interesting
It's
history
still
stories
dark,
people tell today
though
about
the sky's
noble
beginning to
knights of
turn
glory.
that deep
Battles
navy that
don't
means
tease,
dawn isn't far
including
off.
what you're refeeling
A
now.
few stars
The
hang on
cold,
stubbornly.
creeping dread of being
You squint
utterly
toward the tree
powerless.
line.
Because when the sun goes down,
Nothing.
the world becomes someone else's.
But you can feel
You
it.
shuffle closer to your
Something's
sister,
wrong
who's
out there.
already snoring
The first time
beside
you heard a story
and
about
pulled a
someone
scratchy
disappearing
wool
into the
blanket
woods
over
at
your
night,
head. It smells like
you were
mildew
6.
and smoke.
It was
Your
Elric the
skin
Thatcher.
itches from
Had a bad
freeze.
habit of drinking too
Afraid
much
a
and
rat stayed in the
wandering
corner
around
tonight.
mumbling about
Last week,
fairies.
one bitch your cousins told
One
while
night,
he was
he
dreaming
went out
about
chasing
bread.
his own
He
cow
woke
and
up
never came
bleeding.
back.
No one thought it was odd.
Some
The
say he
wind
got
whistles
lost.
through the thatched
Some say
roof,
wolves.
and you hear a distant bell
One
ring
person
slow
swore they
tolls.
saw lights flickering
Another
between the
death.
trees,
That's the second
dancing
one this
like
week.
candles
You
held by
try not
hands
to
that didn't
imagine
cast
who it
shadows.
was. You try not to
Historians
think
still
about the
debate
cult
whether
in the
medieval
dark.
people believed in
You think of
spirits
the
or
plague.
just used
They
them
call
to
it the
explain a
pestilence.
world they couldn't
Or
control.
God's punishment. No one
You don't
says the
debate.
word Black
You
Death,
just don't
not
go into the
because it
woods
hasn't
after
been
sunset.
invented yet, but because naming things
Another
gives
howl
them
rips through the
power.
air closer
Give
now.
horns to- A
You're not
merchant
the
in
only
a
one
nearby
awake.
town sneezed once and
Lise
died
is
the
already
next
standing
morning.
outside,
His family vanished
squinting
by
at
the
the
end of
tree
week.
line.
You saw the priest.
She holds a
bless the
stick like it might
doors with ash.
actually help.
Your neighbor swears the
You grab
disease
your own
roots
thinner
through
than hers,
windows on
but
the backs of
pointy.
spirits. You nailed cloth
Just
over
in
yours.
case.
Just
You
in
step
case.
outside,
Something scratches
and cold rushes into your
outside.
lungs.
You freaks could
It's
be a
sharp,
dog
biting,
or a fox.
full of
Could be
earth
someone
and damp
trying to
leaves.
steal your tools again.
The kind of air that
Last
makes your
harvest,
bones feel
you
older
caught a
than they
boy
are.
sneaking into your chicken coop.
A
He
few other
looked just
villages are
like
out
your
now,
brother. Maybe
eyes
but
wide,
no
and no one
talks
says a word.
about it. Everyone's too
Everyone's
tired,
looking in the
too
same
hungry,
direction.
too scared
Then
to
you
ask
see it.
questions anymore. This
Movement.
is peasant life.
A
Most
shadow
of it's
bolting
spent
from the
waiting,
woods
waiting
fast,
for morning,
hunched, clearly
waiting for
human.
food, waiting for sickness,
It's Bran,
or taxes, or
the tanner's
something
boy,
even worse.
barefoot,
But you're used to it.
hair
That's the
wild,
scariest part.
eyes wide
Your
as
mother
coins.
once told you that
He
night
runs
is
straight
when the
past the
dead
well and
remember
into the square
living.
before
He
collapsing
said
near
be
the
quiet
stalks.
after sunset.
You rush
The
to
ones who
him.
passed might come asking for things like
What is it
shoes
someone
or
asks?
names.
He can't
You
speak at
whispered a
first,
prayer
but just
before bed.
gasps.
You're not sure if
Then
it's to
bores,
God
he
or
says
just to
between
the
breaths.
moon. Either way,
2 of them
it didn't work.
chased
You're
me.
still wide awake.
Near broke
I'm
my
cold.
leg.
Always cold.
You wait for the
Breath
joke.
fogs
It
in the
doesn't
air.
come.
You roll
Bores.
toward the fire,
Great.
but it's down to nothing.
As if plague,
No
taxes,
more.
and sleep-hating
You used
rodents
the
weren't
last
enough.
one yesterday,
Someone helps him
and
up.
the forest's off
His legs
limits
bleeding.
now, unless you wanna
Probably
find
caught on
from
a
the
root or a
Lord's
branch.
men, or worse,
Could have been worse.
You think back to that old
Could have
man
been
who took
wolves.
2 branches and got 3 ribs broken. Your
You thank the
stomach
stars it
growls.
wasn't wolves.
That helps take your mind off
For
the
now.
scratch.
But it's a
strange
reminder the
historians
woods
still
are
believe that
alive,
medieval peasants
and they're
were true
always
to your
watching.
fate in the dark, or just adapted to
You head
it.
back
But
to your
when you
hut.
live in it, there's no
Heartbeat
question.
still
You
sprinting.
don't just fear the dark.
Your sister
You
meets
fear
you
what
at the
dark
door.
lets in whispers.
Was it ghosts, she
Secrets,
asks.
regrets,
No, you say
creatures. Last spring, someone
bandits.
said a woman
No.
gave birth to a baby with a goat's eye.
Then what?
They say
You
she
pause.
made a deal with a spirit at
Something something with tusks and bad timing. She blinks. Oh, like Uncle. You laugh despite yourself.
The flea bites burn
Inside,
worse when you sweat.
your grandmother
Maybe
is
that's
wide
how it
awake,
gets into the skin.
muttering about the
No one really
forest's
knows
hunger.
how the plague spreads.
She's
But
always
some
been
nights,
dramatic.
you think you can
But
feel it
tonight,
crawling.
her words
The most
hit a little
interesting
different.
history
You sit near the
stories might be
fire,
about kings and
which is
crowns.
finally spitting
But
some
your story
actual
is
warmth.
this. A scratch,
Your brother curls
a
up
cough,
next to you,
a candle flickering
sucking
low,
his thumb.
and the quiet knowledge that
He's
if
too
you
small
die
to
in your
understand what
sleep,
just happened.
Your body might not be found until
You
morning.
envy him.
Even then, it might
People
be
always
buried
talk
in a
about how
man's spit
medieval
without your
peasants
name.
feared the
You hear
unknown.
rooster. False alarm,
But
it's
you don't
too
fear it,
early.
you live
But
with
the
it.
village will stir now.
The woods aren't
Someone will check
mysterious.
the fire. Someone else will
They're just
step out to
rude.
the latrine and mutter a curse at the frost.
They take
You're still
livestock.
alive for now.
They take people.
Scratching stopped.
They
Or
take
maybe
sound
it
and
didn't.
twist it
You
into
just
something
don't
that keeps
care
you up at
anymore.
night.
Tomorrow
Historians
might be
write
better
about
or
night
worse.
patrols.
Doesn't matter.
But your village can't
Morning
afford
is
one.
always a kind of miracle.
Your patrol
You
is
close your
gossip and
eyes
gut
just a little,
instinct.
the candle's out.
If enough people
Three
say,
toes.
"I don't like that
Then
sky,"
silence.
you stay
lie
indoors.
still. Heart
If
thudding.
someone hears
The
a
church
scream,
bell never rings at this
you don't
hour unless
investigate, you
something's gone
reinforce the
very
latch
wrong.
and pretend
It
you're
echoes
asleep.
across the fields like a bad omen wrapped in
It's not
fog.
cowardice,
You
like it's
don't breathe.
experience.
You just
You
listen.
stare at the flickering
One
firelight,
toe for a man,
trying to forget the
two
sound
for
of
a woman,
Bran screaming
three
through
for
the
a child.
trees.
You swallow hard.
Trying to
Air
forget the
feels
speed
different
of whatever
now together, like
chased
it's
him.
holding its breath
You
with
close your
You
eyes
remember
and
what happened
immediately
last
picture
time
it.
The bell rang like that. 3 toes.
Not the boar,
And the next
something
morning,
bigger,
half the village
something
vanished
not
into
supposed to
quarantine.
exist.
The dead
Maybe it's the
house,
woods playing
we
tricks
call it.
again.
But no one leaves flowers.
Or maybe the stories your
No one
grandmother
even
tells aren't just
whispers prayers
bedtime
anymore.
nonsense.
You curl
Maybe
your
the woods
fingers
really
into
are
the straw
hungry.
mattress. It's damp and warm.
You lie
from
back
shed
down
bodies.
eventually.
Someone next to you
Your
coughs.
sister has
It's
rolled into your
probably just the
spot.
smoke from the fire.
You nudge her.
Probably. There's a saying in your
She
village.
grumbles but
If
moves.
the bell rings
You
after
settle
dark,
in,
don't open
pull the
door.
blanket up to your
You didn't
chin.
used to believe in that
Let
sort
the
of thing.
fires crackle,
But
lull you
now,
back.
You lock the door. You wear the
Outside,
broomstick
lots of the woods
between the
whisper
handles.
things you don't want to
even place
understand.
garlic above the
Inside, you
lintel.
whisper a
Not
name.
for vampires, no one believes
Not
in those,
yours.
but because old
Just in
man
case
said
the
he keeps
forest is
spirits from
listening.
slipping under the threshold. You don't
It's the new
question
moon
old
tonight.
man.
No
He survived
stars,
2 plagues and a
no
drunk
glow.
lord. Besides,
Just black,
it smells
thick, and
better
whole.
than a latrine. A
Like the
baby's
world
done
forgot how to turn
crying
the
in
lights
next
back
house
on.
over. Thin walls.
Even the fire doesn't want to
shared
cooperate.
nightmares. You hear the
You tried
mother
coaxing it with
soap
dry
shooshing
twigs
sound,
and desperate
probably rocking
muttering.
him back and forth
But
over
all
and
you've
over.
got is a
You've heard
dying
stories
ember
of
pretending to be
babies who
helpful.
didn't make it through the night,
It's the
not
kind of
because
darkness that makes you
sickness,
feel
but
like you're
because
the
their
last
mothers were
living
too
thing on
tired,
earth.
too
And that's
broken,
when you
too
remember what day it
terrified.
is.
People don't talk about those babies.
The 13th of
Well,
Ember
you've seen
month.
the holes
New
behind the
moon.
chicken coop. You stare up at
No
the beams
chickens laid
above
today.
you. Once,
Your mother
a man
burned the
hanged
bread.
himself from one of those
And the
embers
healer's cat
once
ran
died.
off without
You were
warning.
just a kid.
That's
You
3
watched him
signs.
cut him down.
You know what they
His tongue
say.
had gone purple. You remember
Which
thinking it looked
time?
like a plum.
You don't say the word
You
out
never
loud.
ate plums again.
No one ever
Now
does.
you lie there.
But you feel it.
barely blinking. Just
It is like the
waiting
air
for
got
the
colder
next
for no
sound.
reason.
A scream,
Like the
a knock,
floorboards
a
creak
cough
more
that
than
doesn't
usual.
stop. It's
Like the
strange
shadows
that you
under the
can be
bed are
exhausted
leaning in
and
a little
still
too close.
scared to sleep.
People think witch
That's
trials
peasant
happened in
life for
big
you.
courts with
You
scrolls
work
and
until your
wigs.
hands bleed.
That
Eat
came
until
later.
you're half full.
Right
Then
now,
lie
in your
bed,
time,
terrified
witch
of
hunting
silence.
is done with
The
whispers,
death toll is
candles,
rising. You heard
and
it in
just
the
enough
market
fear to keep
yesterday.
it going.
That scribe from 3 towns
Historians
over
still debate whether
Someone's
medieval
the
witch
Dinah's
paranoia
wife.
was driven
They say
more
she
by
built the
religion or
coochie
by
for the
social
kids.
tension.
You do the same. Oh,
But
yes.
you know the
There's
truth.
that farmer
Witchcraft
whose
is what
goats
people
dropped
say when they
dead
don't
all at
understand
once.
something,
Probably not plague.
or when they do
Probably
understand
just
it,
bad luck.
but
Still,
want an
no
excuse.
one's spoken to him since.
You lie
Even the
flat,
priest is
wide-eyed,
scared now.
blanket
See
up to
them
your
flinch
chin.
when someone sneezes?
You're
You
not
watch them
cold.
burn incense
You're
until
alert,
the chapel fills with
hyper-aware.
smoke thick enough to choke the
Every
rats
sound
out
in the
of
house
hiding.
feels like a
You
sentence
poked in
being
there
formed.
once. People
Grandma
stepped
hasn't
away.
spoken in hours.
Historians still debate whether medieval
Your
people
mother is
understood
still...
plague as
Your sister
disease.
keeps muttering
Some
something
say
about
they blamed
teeth.
bad air. Others thought
You
it was
don't
punishment
ask.
from God.
The night is
But
quiet,
in your world,
but too
it doesn't
quiet.
matter. Truth doesn't
The kind of
stop
quiet that you now
people from
understand means
dying.
everyone
A girl
else is
in the
lying
next
in
town
bed,
over said she saw death
wide
itself
awake,
walking between houses,
thinking the
touching
exact same
doors.
thing. Who's
Just
next?
a tall figure in a dark cloak.
Because someone someone will be
called her a
next.
liar,
It's how
and
this
her
works.
parents died. No one called her
It
anything
always
after
starts
that.
small.
You don't want to sleep.
A
Sleep
rumor?
is when the plague comes.
A
You've
sheep
heard the
born with a
story.
twisted leg.
People go to bed fine,
A patch
wake
of
up with
mildew on the
black
bread that
spots
looks
under their
vaguely
arms,
like a
and
face.
die by
And then
nightfall.
someone
You've
says,
also heard the quiet
"Didn't Maud touch that bread
no
first?"
one says out loud. That song
And now
don't
Maud
even
doesn't
wake
sleep
up at all.
anymore.
They
You
die
remember
dreaming,
last season
and that's the
when the
kind of
chickens
stuff
started
you can
dying?
hope for.
One by
So you
one,
stay awake,
feathers
just in
everywhere.
case. Just
No
in case
blood.
tonight's your turn
Just
to wake
empty.
up coughing. A candle
Cold
flares
birds.
to life in the neighbor's window. You
People
see the
looked
silhouette
around.
of a woman holding
Then they
in
looked
her
at Widow
arms,
Alice.
her shoulders hunched. Then another
She
shadow
always
joins
had
her.
too many
They don't
herbs,
speak. Then the candle
talked to
goes out.
herself,
You wonder if she's
had
the
no
one who
husband,
rang the bell.
which meant too much
Outside,
independence for
something
everyone's
howls.
comfort.
Not a
You remember
wolf
when they
goes
dragged her
alone,
from her
but a
hut?
dog, probably, or a
You remember how her
grieving man.
screams didn't
Or a
echo?
grieving man
You
who
remember how the
sounds
village
like a
was
dog.
quiet for
You've
3
heard
whole
both.
days after?
Neither is easy to forget. You
Now there's a
remember
new
when your own
target.
brother got
Clara.
sick. It started with a headache.
She smiled at a boy
then
last week,
chills. Then
and the
he
boy tripped
vomited
into a
black
ditch
stuff
5 minutes
onto the
later.
dirt floor. You thought he
Coincidence,
might pull
right?
through.
Wrong.
He didn't- The worst part wasn't losing
Someone
him.
saw her
It was how
boiling
fast his
flowers under the
parents forgot
moon.
to say his name.
Someone else said her hair moves weird
Your
when she
back
prays.
aches. You're
You saw her
17,
yesterday,
but
dirty,
feel like 50.
tired,
You reach
scared.
for the little cloth bag under your
She asked for a
dried
crust of
herbs
bread.
from the healer's daughter.
You didn't give her one.
Supposed to protect
You told
against
yourself it
fever.
was because
They
you
just
were
smell
hungry
like
too.
hay and regret.
But if you're being
You hold
honest,
them anyway. Something about the ritual
you didn't want to be the
helps.
next person they
Pretending
whispered
you can
about.
do something
You hear
helps.
something
It's
outside.
not much, but it's all you've got.
A
Then you
knock.
hear it again,
No.
the bell. Just
More
one
like
ring this time.
stones falling.
Then silence. The worst
You peek
kind
out
of
the window.
silence. You
Someone's
lie
left a
back
little pile of
down.
dried bones
You
in front of
whisper the
Clara's
same
door.
prayer you've said for weeks. You don't
That's
know
not a
if it
warning.
worked. You don't
That's
know
a
if anyone
sentence.
listens. But maybe that's not the point.
You shiver and close the
Maybe
shutter
point is
fast.
saying it anyway.
Not because of
Saying it
Clara,
because if you don't, you
but
might lose more than your
because you
life.
suddenly remembered
might
that she
lose
used to
your
sing
hope.
lullabies that
You
made your
lose
sister fall
eyes.
asleep.
The fire's
And now she
out.
might not see
The
another
candle's
sunrise.
cold. The scratching has stopped.
You crawl back to the
Tomorrow will
mattress,
come, or it won't.
pull the
But
blanket tight,
tonight, you made it
try to
the
stop
end.
thinking,
It
but your
wasn't the
brain
stolen
doesn't
hug that
listen.
hugged me, Doc.
You think
It
about
was
how
a text
dark it
message.
is,
I still think of you.
how the fire
Even when
won't
I'm
stay
with my
lit,
wife, I read it one
how your
morning
sister's
earlier
face
this
looks
week,
strange in the
after
moonless
David had
glow,
gone to work,
sharp,
and I was clearing out
shadowed,
some old equipment in the shed.
older than it
was the
should.
laptop he'd used 3 years ago, which
You
no
blink.
longer worked smoothly and
It's
was
just
now
the
in
dark
storage.
playing
But
tricks.
I wanted to clear
Probably.
out some stuff because every time I opened
The most
shed
interesting
door, I
history
felt
stories skip this
claustrophobia.
part.
Just like my
They'll
life
tell you
right
about
now.
grand
I
witch
decided
trials
to
and
wipe the
pyres and
data
towns that
and take the
cheered while
machine
women
to a
burned.
local
But they
electronics
don't tell you how
recycler,
it
but
started.
when I turned it on, the
How it
screen
always
displayed
started with
slight
a
error
look.
message, then automatically opened
A
an old
silence.
Google Drive folder that had been
A
synced
small
from
pile
David's
of bones
account,
no
and
one admits
inside
to
there
leaving.
was a file with no name.
They don't tell
Just
you
a
how it
string
feels
of
to lie in
dates.
bed,
2023
wondering if you did something strange today, if you stepped on the wrong
I
herb.
wasn't looking for it,
If
but
you are
there it
next,
was,
your sister
exposed.
shifts.
And I clicked on
Her
it.
voice barely a
Inside
whisper.
was a backup of a conversation. Hundreds
Do
of
you think
lines
she's a
long.
witch?
I don't know why
You don't
David said
answer.
maybe
Because you
he
know the
accidentally
answer
turned
doesn't
on
matter.
automatic backups. But what I saw
Once the
was
village decides
fragments
the
of a
truth
clear,
is irrelevant,
undeniably
you
illicit
try to
affair.
sleep.
The woman was named Tuesday.
But now the
I
room
didn't
feels
know her real
colder.
name, but the
The shadows
nickname sounded
sharper,
youthful and
the dark
suggestive,
heavier,
and completely
and when
out
you
of
do
place in
finally
the world
drift
of a
off,
50-year-old man
it's to the
with a
sound of
wife
someone
and a
crying
child
very
about to
quietly.
start college. I wish last night had
From
been
Clara's
longer.
house,
I can't
you
take
never
my
find out
eyes
who
off
left the
you,
bones.
even though my wife is sitting right
But you
next
don't
to
ask.
me. When you
Because
pulled out
asking
that red
questions
dress,
after dark
I
is the
couldn't
most
breathe.
dangerous magic
I
of
read
all.
every line, every word, as
You
if
feed the
reading
fire like it's a
verdict on
hungry
my
animal.
own life.
Because in
I
this
didn't
village,
scream.
fire is
I didn't
more than
smash the
warmth.
computer. I just
It's
sat
protection.
there in the dim
It's
light of the
proof that
warehouse,
something in your
clutching a
world
wireless
still
mouse.
obeys
My
you.
eyes burning,
That
but not a
light
drop
still
of water
exists,
coming
even
out.
if just
I had
barely.
suspected. I had felt. I
You
had
add a
hunch,
twig,
but the feeling of
then
facing
another.
The truth was no less.
You
It was
watch the
like a
flames
punch
crawl
to the
up like they're
chest,
scared to
but it
commit.
didn't leave a bruise, but a
The wood
cold
hisses,
void,
pops,
stretching from
and
my
finally
neck
settles
down
into
to
a
my
flickering
lower
glow.
abdomen. I printed out
Not
the
much,
chat,
but
the
enough.
full text,
Enough to
not
make the
because
shadows
I
back
wanted to
off.
confront him, but because I needed confirmation
Enough to
that
keep
I
the
wasn't
memories
crazy,
at bay.
that I wasn't
The fire is the
imagining
one thing in your
things,
life
this
that feels
truth
sacred.
existed. I don't
Not
back
the
recent
chapel.
conversations I had.
Not the
David
priest.
Shalom.
Not the Reeves ledger with your name spelled wrong, but this orange crackling thing in the center of your hut. It gives no sermons, makes no demands, just light, just warmth. You sit close and hold out your fingers. The heat stings, but it's a good kind of sting, the kind that tells you you're still alive. Your little brother crawls over and plops down beside you, half asleep. He drags his wool blanket with him, knocking over a dented clay cup in the process. "Tell me a story," he mumbles. You almost say no. You're tired. Your bones ache. You're still shaken from the whisper-quiet crying outside Clara's house. But then you look at him, and you nod, because this is how peasants survived the night, not with swords, not with spells, but with stories. You tell him about the crow who stole a king's crown and buried it in a dung heap. He giggles. You smile. Then you tell him about the girl who tricked death into a game of riddles. You make her clever and quick, with a voice like rain and a braid full of herbs. He rests his head on your shoulder. The fire dances and the shadows hold back. This is your real shield. Historians still debate whether medieval peasants had anything resembling leisure time. Technically, no. But there was this moment by the hearth, when your hand stopped working and your mouth started remembering, or inventing. Sometimes it's hard to tell which. Your mother joins you, silent but present. She stirs the coals a bit, just for the comfort of movement. Grandma dozes with her mouth open, probably dreaming about beetroot again. She always did have low culinary ambition. You keep telling stories. Now it's about a cat who becomes a knight and wins a cheese war. Your brother giggles again. You love that sound. It makes the rest of the day worth it. There's something about firelight that makes everything feel slightly less awful. Maybe it's the warmth. Maybe it's the way it draws people closer. Maybe it's because when you're telling stories, you're not thinking about taxes or illness, or who left bones outside a neighbor's door. You're just here, present, alive. You remember when your father used to tell stories. His voice was rough like bark, but soft when he wanted it to be. He'd sit just like you are now, big hands wrapped around a mug of mead, eyes glowing from flame and memory. He once said the fire listens, that it remembers. You're not sure you believe that. But tonight, you kind of hope it's true. Your brother finally falls asleep, curled up like a puppy on the floor. You pull a threadbare cloak over him and stoke the fire just a bit more. You hear a spark hiss, then something odd smell. Not smoke, not burning wool. Something sweet. You lean closer. It's rosemary. Or sage? Maybe. Hard to tell. Then you realize someone threw herbs into the fire. Not you. Not your mother, she's half asleep with her head against the wall. Not your grandmother still snoring. You glance around. No one's near the hearth. A chill moves across your shoulders. Not from the air, from something else. You suddenly remember an old village tale, how fire could reveal truth if fed the right ingredients. How witches used to cast their hopes into flames to see if they'd be answered. You stare at the dancing embers. Did someone make a wish tonight? Or a warning?
You have no idea.
You don't move. You just watch. The flames rise, twist, then settle. No shapes, no messages, just fire. You tell yourself it's nothing.
We had never met.
Just dried
but we
herbs.
understood each other
Nothing
so
more.
well. They
Still,
didn't
you say a
ask
little
who
prayer.
I was.
Not to
They
God.
were just grateful
Not exactly,
that
just
someone had
outward,
dared to tell a story
into the dark.
they had not dared to tell.
Because that's what you do when
I
nothing
started
makes
writing
sense.
every
You
day,
stoke the
not because I wanted to
fire.
be famous, but
You
because I
tell a
felt like I was
story,
coming back to myself,
and you hope the shadows
woman
stay
who had
patient for
dreamed of
one
writing
more
novels,
night.
who had
The
dreamed of
fire
being
pops
the
again.
master of her own story, was
You
now
smile
telling
just a
her
little,
own story.
because even if you don't have power, you have this.
David had no idea.
Even if you don't own
He went on
land,
as if nothing
you
had
own this
changed.
moment.
He poured me tea
And even
in
if
the morning,
night
but
takes
he wouldn't look
everything
me in the
else,
eye. He told his
it can't
son to
take the
study
stories
hard.
you tell
He
by
sent
the
me
fire.
links to political articles he thought I would like.
You
That
wait until
false
everyone's
normalcy
asleep.
made me want to
Your
write
sister
more,
drools on the
because
mattress.
he didn't know that I was
Your mother
exposing him
snores
not in a
gently,
courtroom, but on
head
paper,
tilted back like
not
she's
with
dreaming of the
lies,
bread she
but
never
with
bakes right.
words. I was writing chapter 6
Even the
when I
fire
received
has
a message
quieted
from an
just a
anonymous
few
user.
lazy
The
embers
email
blinking in the
subject
dark
was,
like tired
"Do
eyes.
you want to publish?" I hesitated.
You stand
Then I read
slowly,
on. The sender was a freelance
quietly.
editor in Montreal, looking for new
Your
work to
foot
pitch
lands
to
in a
small
cold puddle
feminist
chicken
publishing
water.
house. She didn't ask me for my
Maybe,
identity. She
or one of the
simply wrote,
roof leaks that
"I've
shows up
never read
uninvited
betrayal
every
so
other
boldly
night.
and so pointedly." I sat
You
in front of the
shiver,
screen, my heart pounding
but
like
you
a
don't
kid
stop.
whose first story
Tonight,
had been
you're
published.
going out.
I had published books before, but
Not for
only short
adventure,
stories.
not
I
for
had never
love,
finished a
for
real
rabbit.
novel. And now I was about to do it again,
Because
not
the
for a
grain stores are
career,
low
but
again.
for survival.
And if you have to choke
I
down
sent in
one
an
more bowl of
unfinished
root stew, you're going to
manuscript
start
and got a
hallucinating
response within
turnips,
3
whispering
days.
insults.
We want to
So you
print
slip
it, and
outside
we
with your
want to
father's
keep the
old snare, a
original
loop of
voice.
twine,
I
2
told
splinters,
no one,
and your
not
last
David,
shred of
not
hope.
my friends, not my son.
The cold
I had
slaps
the
you the
book
moment you leave the
trapped in
hut.
a drawer with the printout of our
No moon
affair.
again.
Text messages.
The sky looks
a
like
small
wet
place,
charcoal.
Private.
Your breath
secret,
clouds up around your face
powerful.
like guilt.
Then one day, while I
You
was
duck
cooking
low,
dinner,
heading towards the
David
tree
walked
line where
by
the thickets
and saw
hide the
me
holes.
editing the
You've done this
manuscript on the
before.
screen. He smiled
Quiet
indifferently
steps,
and asked,
careful
"What are you
eyes.
writing?" I looked him
Listen
straight
for
in the
movement,
eye.
but
For the
don't
first
make
time in
any.
months, a novel.
Watch for
Fiction.
glinting eyes,
Yes. About
twitching
what?
ears,
I smiled
the telltale
about a man
wobble
who
of a
betrays
rabbit
his
too
wife
full of
without
confidence.
realizing that his wife is also
But this
silently
time,
betraying him.
the risk
With
is
words.
different,
He paused for
because
a few
poaching
seconds,
is illegal.
then nodded. I didn't know
Always
what he
has
understood,
been.
but I knew.
The
He
woods
was
belong
starting
to the
feel
Lord,
uneasy.
even the
That
rabbits,
night, I sat
even the
down
dirt,
to write a new
even the air when
chapter.
if you
I
breathe too
described a
loudly.
scene where Daniel, the
You're not supposed to be
traitor,
here.
begins to
If the
notice
Reeves men
something
catch you,
familiar in a
you'll
book
be
he
lucky to end
happens
up in
to
the
be
stocks.
reading. I'll let him see his
More
own
likely,
name looming
they'll
over the
take your
pages
snare,
like a ghost.
your
I
rabbit,
let him loose
and
with
your
just
boots.
like I had.
You can't
I
afford to
never wanted
lose your
turn
boots.
pain into something more
They're held
powerful,
together with more
like a
prayer than
story,
leather.
a poem, or a public confession.
Historians still
Leave a
debate
comment
whether
below.
lords truly
If you ever
enforce
wanted
these
to tell
laws
your
with
own
consistency
story,
or
if you're
cruelty.
writing but don't know where to stop,
You don't
Clara
debate.
can be your companion in the next
You
chapter.
still remember
When he
the boy
asked
they
me,
caught
"Who
last
are you
fall,
writing about?"
his
I
ear
just
nailed to a
smiled
tree
and
as a
said,
reminder.
"About someone
He
I
didn't
once
scream.
believed in." I don't know if that moment confused him
He
or
just went quiet
surprised
and
him,
left
but I
town 2
do
days later.
know it
No
made
one asked
David
where.
think. For the first time in months,
You
I saw
crouch
his
now,
eyes
just
linger
near the
on
edge
me
of the
for longer
thicket.
than 3 seconds.
You find a track, a
Not
line
out
of tiny,
love, nor out of
hopeful
concern.
footprints in the mud.
It was the look of
You set
someone
the
who was
snare.
beginning to sense a new power
And
sprouting
then
in the old
you wait.
kitchen. The
You think
novel
about
was
all the
finished.
things people
My
sneak
original
out to do
title
at
was
night.
The Betrayer, but my editor in Montreal
It's not just rabbits.
suggested something
Some
else,
sneak out to meet a
lighter,
lover like
more
Aiden and
profound.
Brielle. To
The
see,
Man
they
Without a
used to
Mirror.
leave
It
sprigs of
sounded
heather
like
by
an
the chapel
introspective
steps.
novel. Not hard,
You saw them
but
once,
anyone who
half
has
naked in a hay
experienced
cart,
betrayal will understand.
laughing like they
This is
didn't
the
have
kind of
chores in the
man who
morning.
never wants to look himself in the eye.
Others sneak
Small
out for less
Montreal
romantic
press set a
reasons.
spring release
To
date.
trade,
I signed a rights deal and was promised
to
a series
steal,
of interviews
to
after
pray
the
in
book
ways
came
the
out,
priest
under the
wouldn't
pen
approve
name
of.
CB North. I was still
You once
an
saw a
unknown
woman
voice
bury a
among
clay
hundreds
doll
of
under a
female
tree and
authors, but
whisper
the book
something
was
in a
already
language you
making
didn't
waves in the
recognize.
indie publishing
She never
world.
spoke to you
There
again.
was something about the voice cold,
You
sharp,
never told anyone.
brutally
There's a
honest
rustle
that
nearby.
made people pause. I still didn't
You
tell
freeze.
David.
Rabbit.
Not because I was afraid he would find out.
Please be a
or because
rabbit.
I enjoyed
You
holding
squint.
his secret
Your trap is
without
twitching.
tears, without drama, but enough
Then a
to bury
snap.
his fake
You
calm.
pounce
I
forward and find it small,
The mask
gray,
cannot last forever.
limp,
It all started when David's
still warm.
longtime friend Roger came over.
Dinner.
Jovial
You feel a strange mix of pride and guilt. You whisper a quiet thanks to the woods, to the rabbit, to anyone who might be watching.
Clara, did you write this?
You don't cry, but you kind of want to.
Yeah.
You stuff the rabbit into a cloth and start back toward the village. But you're not alone. Footsteps.
The way you describe
not yours. You duck behind a hedge, holding your breath.
Then he looked at me with a half-teased
A shadow passes by, tall, cloaked, purposeful. Not the Reeves men.
Maybe because
worse,
out there,
a monk.
Like David
Brother Mathis probably out doing penance again. Everyone respects Brother Mathis, mostly because they're terrified of him. He walks barefoot, eats once a day, and mutters in Latin like he's rehearsing for Judgment Day.
Are you writing a story about me?
They say he fasts to keep the village pure. You think he fasts because he likes the way hunger makes his vision sharper? One time, he stared into the fire for 6 hours and then declared the goats were plotting to seduce the baker's wife. No one laughed, not even the goats.
For the first time in weeks.
He pauses, sniffs the air. You clutch the rabbit tighter. He moves on. You wait until you're sure he's gone before crawling out and speed-walking back to your hut. When you get home, the fire's out completely. You sneak the rabbit into the corner and hide it under a broken basket. Tomorrow, you'll find it. Pretend it wandered into the yard and died of natural causes. Convenient. Right. Your mother will pretend to believe you. You'll pretend the stew doesn't taste like guilt. You lie back down, heart still racing. Outside in the woods are still humming. Not with wolves, not with spirits, with secrets. That's what the night holds more than anything, secrets you're not supposed to see, and choices you're not supposed to make. You close your eyes. You dream of snares made of silver, of rabbits that whisper curses before dying, of monks with hollow eyes who leave footprints made of ash. You wake up cold, tired, and vaguely ashamed, but also full. And that's the kind of victory peasants take when they can. You wake to hoofbeats, not the soft kind. Not the lazy clip-clop of a cart mule hauling vegetables. No, these are fast, sharp, urgent. You sit up so quickly you nearly whack heads with your sister, who's snoring beside you. The sky outside the window slit is still dark, but there's a strange glow on the horizon. Torchlight. Several of them.
What do you want?
You already know who it is. The Lord's men never sleep. You hear it clearly now. 3 horses. Maybe 4. The jingle of reins. The metallic rasp of chainmail. Someone's barking orders. Probably in French. That's how you know it's official. You don't have to look to guess what's happening. They're making their rounds, or what they call rounds. This isn't some noble errand to protect the village. This is a surprise inspection, a show of power, a reminder that your bed, your house, your entire life can be poked, prodded, and trampled on literally any time they choose. Historians still debate whether lords routinely sent their men out at night to intimidate or simply maintain control. But in your village, Ayat, there's no doubt. If the Lord's men ride after sunset, someone's going to cry before sunrise. You press yourself against the wall, listening. Voices grow louder. Boots hit dirt. Then a knock. Not on your door. Not yet, but close. 3 doors down. Someone yells. You hear something crash. Your mother stirs. Stay down, she whispers. You already were. You always do.
Dinner with David
Your
and
whole
my
family
son.
presses flat to the mattress like you're trying to sink into the earth. You hear sobbing now. Then a man's voice pleading. Then a thud. Then silence. The torchlight shifts outside your window, casting shadows across the wall like spindly fingers. You see one stop just outside and you don't breathe. A boot appears in the gap under the door. Then a second. You count 3 heartbeats. Then they move on. You exhale so slowly it feels like prayer. They're not always like this.
I don't mention David by name.
Sometimes they come in the day, smiling, charming, asking about harvest totals and voluntary gifts. But it's worse when they come like this late, loud, uninvited. Because when they write after midnight, they're not here to ask questions. They're here to remind you that your life is not your own. You remember last time, they came to inspect the grain stores. Found nothing wrong. Still took half a sack. Called it administrative correction. You called it robbery.
Not a lot. But
quietly, in your head.
No one knew who I was here.
One of them once asked you your name. You gave it. He repeated it back, mispronounced, then laughed. Too poor for a vowel, he said. You laughed too, because what else could you do? The most boring story to fall asleep. Not when hooves mean hunger. Not when your taxes are paid in sweat and silence. Not when a torchlight outside your door means a family 3 huts down will lose their winter savings by morning. You hear voices again. Louder now, coming back your way. Door stuck. Someone growls. You feel your heart drop into your stomach.
Without me telling him.
Your door is stuck. The latch has been jammed since spring. You hear a boot slam into wood.
He told me. I laughed.
Then another. The door holds. One of the soldiers curses. You hear your grandmother, barely awake, mutter something about curses and war horses. She's never liked authority. The soldiers move on again. This time, they don't come back. After a while, the hoofbeats fade, the torches vanish, and your world breathes again. Your sister whispers, "Are they gone?" Yeah, you murmur, "For good." No, you say without thinking, "Never." You try to sleep, but your body's too tense. You stare at the ceiling and wonder if they'll be back tomorrow. If they'll decide your stuck door was suspicious. If they'll claim your mother undercounted her barley contribution. If they'll want something else. Something you can't hide under a floorboard. You wonder what it must be like to sleep in a house where no one knocks after midnight. Where horses stay in barns, not outside your window. Where peace isn't a thing that ends when boots hit mud. You wouldn't know. You've never known. You close your eyes. You dream of horses made of smoke, of doors that open themselves, of tax records written in your blood, and when you wake, the fire's out. But at least the boots are gone. For now, you jolt awake gasping. For a second, you don't know where you are. You don't know who you are. All you know is that something followed you out of that dream. It was a woman, or a shadow, or both. She was standing at the foot of your bed, whispering something you couldn't hear but felt. The words slid under your skin, into your teeth, behind your eyes. You sit up, sweating through your tunic. It was just a dream. You keep telling yourself that. Just a dream. But then you remember the mark.
realized I was losing my husband.
You pull up
until
your
he stopped
sleeve.
touching my hand
There,
while
near
pouring
your
tea.
elbow,
It was an autumn
is a
morning
bruise the
in
size of a
Vancouver.
coin.
As the maple leaves on
You
my
poke
porch
it,
began to turn
it
from
stings.
pale orange to deep red. The change
This
of
isn't the
seasons
first time you've
always
woken
brought
up
me
like
peace,
this.
but that day,
You've been dreaming
I could
strange for
feel
weeks now.
something had changed.
People you
David
don't
set
know.
his cup of tea down in front of
Places
me as
you've
he
never
always
seen.
did. But for the first
And
time
voices
in nearly 2
always
decades,
voices.
he didn't touch my hand.
Sometimes you
Didn't
wake up
look at
crying.
me. Didn't stop.
Once
He
you
just
woke
stood
up laughing.
adjusted
That
his
was
shirt,
worse.
and left the kitchen as if I were an old
You roll
wooden
over and see
table
your
or
sister
chair that had
watching
been
you.
too familiar to
Her
notice.
eyes are wide.
I sat
Not scared,
silently
but
for a few
curious.
seconds, then reached for my cup
You
of
were
tea.
whispering
My
again.
hands were
She
cold,
says,
not
"Was
because of
I?"
the cold weather, but because I realized
She
that the
nods.
silence between
In
us
the
was
old tongue.
growing,
You
not the
blink. I don't know the old
comfortable silence
tongue.
after years of living together, but the
She
kind
just
of
shrugs.
silence in which neither
You
of
do
us
in
had
your sleep.
anything left to say.
Historians still
Or
debate
worse,
whether medieval
there was
peasants
too
believed
much to
dreams
say.
came from God,
47 years
or
old.
demons,
A regular
or
Canadian
too much
woman with a
onion
regular
soup.
marriage, a regular
But in
two-story
your
house in a
village,
regular
it's more
Vancouver
complicated
suburb.
than
I
that.
used to be a short story writer for
Dreams
a
are
literary
messages,
magazine in Montreal.
warnings,
But after marrying David and
punishments,
moving west,
sometimes
I put my passion
possessions.
aside to raise a family, have
Your
kids,
grandmother
and
once
live
said,
a settled life.
"If the dead
I
miss
don't
you,
regret it. At least not
they'll
before
visit in
things started to
dreams."
get strange.
You thought she was
My
being
husband,
poetic.
David,
Now you're not
works
so
for the
sure.
British Columbia government. He
Because
is a
this
calm,
bruise you didn't fall
quiet
yesterday.
man who is not prone to
You didn't
showing
bang
his
into
emotions.
anything.
In fact, I
And
used
it's
to think
shaped
that was a
oddly
plus.
like a
I
thumbprint.
didn't need a man
You've
who
heard
was overly
stories.
romantic. I just needed
The
someone
blacksmith's
to be by my
wife
side
claimed
every
she
night,
dreamed of a
to share
drowning well
meals,
every
to
night
hug
for
him
a
before
month.
bed, and to take
Then
the
her
kids to
husband
school
slipped,
every morning. But
cracked
that
his
very
head,
routine,
and drowned
that
in a puddle
seemingly
outside the forge.
solid
Old Nan had
relationship was
visions of
crumbling
bees
without my
swarming her
knowledge.
face.
I began to notice
Days
that
later,
David
her
came
daughter
home
was
late.
stung once.
There were days when he didn't eat
In the
dinner.
throat.
There were days when he sent me a text message that
Didn't
simply
make
said,
it.
"Busy
You used
in
to
a
laugh
meeting."
at those
He rarely
stories.
smiled at me. He stopped asking me
But you're
what
not
books I
laughing
was
now.
reading,
Not
and
after the
didn't
dream
notice
woman
that my
stared
stew was
straight at
different
you.
from usual. And strangest of
Not
all,
after she whispered
he
something you
stopped
still
lying
feel
next to me at
echoing
night.
in your
I
bones.
wondered,
You
did
get
I
up and
do
pour a bit of
something
water
wrong?
into a clay
Or
cup.
is it simply that
You sip
after
it.
18 years of
Cold.
marriage, the marriage will gradually
Earthy.
become an old room.
Real.
No one bothers to dust it anymore.
It helps.
I began to
A
pay
little.
closer attention.
Your mother shifts under the
Quietly.
blanket
I
and
was not
mutters
the
your
jealous
name, not
or
out
nagging
loud.
type of wife. I
But in
believed
that
if
half-asleep
something was
way
wrong,
people
I
speak
would
when they're
know.
dreaming
But
with
that
you.
was the most dangerous
You suddenly
belief.
wonder if she saw the
belief
woman.
that I would know before
Too.
it got too far.
You decide not to
One
ask.
Friday night, David said he was going to
There's a
conference
belief in your
weekend.
village if a
I
dream
didn't
follows
question
you
him.
into the
Just
morning.
told him to bring his allergy
It
medicine
wasn't
and
your
not eat egg
dream.
noodles
You stare into
because
the
he was
ashes of the
prone-
fire,
He nodded, not looking.
thinking about
I went
that.
upstairs to pack. As I folded his
Whose
coat,
dream
a
was
piece of
it?
paper
And
fell
why
out of
did
his
it pick
pocket,
you?
a pair of VIP movie
You remember
tickets for
last winter,
two at a theater
when
on
Clara's brother
Granville
before
Island.
Clara
The
became
show
the
was at
village's new
7:30 on
suspicion,
Wednesday
began
night.
drawing
He said
strange
he'd be
symbols in the
worked
dirt.
overtime and gotten home late.
Circles
I
inside
said
circles.
nothing. I just stood
Eyes
the
with no
ticket,
pupils.
looked at it for a few
He said he
seconds
saw
like
them
I
in
was
his
holding a
sleep.
receipt for a cake. Then I
They put him
carefully
on
put it
night
back in my
watch
pocket.
duty.
Maybe I didn't want to admit it
Said
at
the
time.
cold would
Maybe
reset his
I was
balance.
afraid that my
He
own
caught fever
mouth would
within 2
shatter the
nights.
illusion of peace I had tried so
Now he
hard
doesn't
to
speak at all.
maintain. That
Just
night,
hums to himself while
David
staring
slept,
into
I
puddles.
sat on the balcony. The early season
You look at
wind
your
was
bruise
starting to
again.
get chilly,
It's darker
and I put
now.
on a coat, but still felt cold.
You cover it.
Cold in my
Because in your
bones,
village,
cold in my
anything
chest,
unusual
but I didn't
becomes
cry.
dangerous if
It was
it's noticed.
strange. I used to think that if David
The most
betrayed
interesting
me,
history
I would
stories
be hurt,
never talk about
angry,
dreams.
even
They talk
rebellious.
about
But
wars
now,
and
I
kings
just felt
and maps
empty
changing
as if I
shape.
was standing in my own house and
But
no longer
this-
knew who I was in it.
This is
I
the
looked
kind
at
of
the
battle you
shaking
fight
tree.
every
I
night,
suddenly remembered the
alone,
opening of an
with
old
no
short
sword,
story I once
no
wrote.
shield,
People do
just your mind against whatever creeps in through the cracks of sleep. You lie back down. Your sister's watching you still.
I wrote as someone who understood
You
it, but
whisper.
now I live in it.
Don't tell
Living
anyone
every
about the
word that
dream.
I had forgotten
She nods.
For more than 10 years. And
You
as
don't
I
have to
turned
say
look
more.
at my husband
You close
sleeping
your
in the
eyes
room,
again.
I knew the change had
The fire flickers.
Not with
The room
him,
fades.
with me. Have you ever noticed those little
And just
changes?
before sleep
Small
takes you,
enough that no one notices.
You feel something cold near your ear. Not breath, not wind. Just a single word. Unspoken.
If you see yourself in Clara,
Unreal.
stay tuned.
Unwelcome.
This story is just beginning. Hey everyone.
You're older
Tonight,
now.
stepping back into
You're not
a time
sure when
you
it
might
happened.
not survive until
When the bones in your back started aching before the rooster. When your hands grew more blister than skin. When your dreams stopped being silly and started being silent. But it did happen. You move slower, sleep harder, worry deeper,
something is moving.
and still you fear the night. It doesn't make sense, does it?
Because in medieval times,
You've survived
night
dozens
wasn't
of
peaceful.
winters,
It was a countdown to
dodged
chaos.
plague, taxes,
So, before you get
curses,
comfortable, take
and
a
at least
moment to
one
like the video
flirtation
and
with
subscribe,
banditry.
but only if you
You've
really
lost
like what I
friends,
do here. And drop a
buried
comment
siblings.
with your location and
You've
what
watched
time it is
fires
where
go
you
out
are.
and never
I
come
love
back.
seeing how far this sleepy little
So why does the
History
night
Channel
still make your
travels.
teeth clench?
Now, turn
Why do you
down
still
the
reach for the
lights,
latch 3
maybe
times?
turn on the fan
Just to make
for
sure.
some soothing noise.
Tonight,
And let's
you're
get
the last
started
one
on
awake.
tonight's journey together.
Again,
The most
you sit by the
boring
fire,
story to fall
poking at it with a
asleep.
bent iron
Maybe,
rod.
but to you, this
Your sister,
life
now
is
grown,
terrifyingly
sleeps in the
real.
same
You're
spot
in a
she
village
drooled
on
in
the
as a
edge of
child.
nowhere, surrounded
Your
by
mother's
fog
bones
and
creak with
forest.
every
And
breath,
tonight
but
you're
she's
certain
alive.
you won't sleep.
Your brother,
Interesting
well,
history stories people
he's
tell
not here.
today about noble knights and glories.
The field took him. Or maybe it was the steward's ledger.
Now. The cold, creeping
Same
dread
thing.
of being
You know
utterly
every sound this house
powerless, because
makes.
when the sun goes down, the
rafter groan when the wind picks up.
The
The soft whimper your mother makes when her dreams hurt. The rustle of that one rat in the thatch who refuses to die. All of it. And yet, every night, you flinch at the unknown.
You pray the rats stay in the
You remember when you were
corner
10 and
tonight.
thought the
Last
forest
week,
whispered
one bit your
names?
cousin's toe while he
You
was
remember when you were
dreaming about
16
bread.
and your hands
Woke
shook
up
after your
bleeding.
first real
No one thought
punishment?
it was odd. The wind whistles
You remember
through
when
the
you were
thatched
22
roof,
and you watched
you
someone
hear a
get dragged
distant
away
bell
for
through
praying too
slow
long after
tolls.
dark?
Another
Historians
death.
still debate
That's
whether
the second
peasants
one
like you
this
lived in a
week.
state
You
of
try
fear
not to imagine who
or
it
simply
was.
adapted
You
to
try not
hardship.
think about the cough in the dark.
You'd like to
You
tell
think
them
of the
it's both.
plague. They
Fear
call it
becomes
the
part of the
pestilence,
wallpaper.
or God's
You adapt
punishment.
with it,
No
not
one
against
says
it.
The word Black Death, not because
You
it
sleep
hasn't
beside
been
it,
invented yet,
eat
but
with
because
it,
naming things
let it
gives
sit in your
power.
lap while you spin
You've heard
thread.
sto- a
It never
merchant in a
leaves.
nearby town sneezed once and
Some
died
nights,
the next
you hear
morning.
things
His
no one
family
else does.
vanished by the end of the
Like
week.
tonight.
You saw the priests bless
That
the
sound again
doors with
soft,
ash.
rhythmic.
Your neighbor
Click,
swears
drag,
disease floats
click,
through
drag.
windows on the backs of spirits.
Maybe it's
You
a lame
never
cart.
called over yours,
Maybe it's
just
the
in
night
case.
wind playing a joke.
Something
Or
scratches
maybe it's just your
outside.
brain,
You freeze
heavy
to
with
be a
old stories
dog
and older
or a
wounds.
fox. Could be someone trying to
You tell
steal
yourself
your
that,
tools again.
but still you
Last
listen.
harvest, you caught a boy sneaking
You rub your
into
shoulder.
chicken coop. He
The same
looked
one that
just like
aches when
your
it
brother.
rains.
Maybe it was
The
no
one that never
talks
healed
about
quite
it.
right after that
Everyone's
night,
too
the one you
tired,
never
too
talk
hungry,
about.
too
You
scared to
sometimes
ask
think the
questions
ache is your
anymore.
body remembering
This
what your
is
mind
peasant
wants to
life.
forget.
Most of it spent waiting for
Your niece
morning,
Lisa's daughter
waiting
ask you
for
yesterday
food,
why you always
waiting
check the
for
windows
sickness,
3 times
or
before bed.
taxes, or something
You
even
almost told her the
worse.
truth.
But you're used to it. That's
That
the
once,
scariest
years
part.
ago,
Your mother once
a man
told
stood
you that
outside for
night is
hours,
when the dead remember
said
the
nothing,
living. She said to be quiet
did
after
nothing,
sunset. Only
just
ones who
stood there,
passed might come asking for things like shoes
watching,
or names.
breathing,
You whispered a prayer before bed.
and when you
You're not
opened the
sure
door
if
at
it's
dawn,
God or just
there were
to the
footprints.
moon. Either
Just
way,
one pair.
It didn't work. You're still
But they
wide
went in a
awake
circle.
and cold.
You didn't answer her.
Always cold. Your breath
You
fogs
just
in the air.
smiled,
You rolled toward
made
the
a joke
fire,
about
but it's
squirrels,
down
and
to
changed the
nothing.
subject to soup,
No
because
more
that's how
wood.
stories get
You
passed
used the
on.
last of it yesterday,
Not with ink and parchment,
the forests off
but with
limits now.
pauses,
Unless you want to find
with
from the
silences,
Lord's men, or worse, obedient. You
with what
think
you don't
back to that
say.
old man who took 2
Fire
branches and
sputters.
got 3 ribs broken. Your stomach
You let it.
growls.
Let
That
the
helps
shadows
take your mind
stretch.
off to scratch it.
Let the
It's
cold
strange
fingers
historians still
return.
debate whether medieval peasants
You're not
were
afraid of them
truly afraid
anymore,
the
not in the
dark,
way a
or
child
just
is.
adapted to it. But when you live in it,
Now,
there's no
you fear the
question.
toll,
You don't just
what it's
fear the
taken from
dark.
you,
You fear what the dark lets in
what it will
whispers.
still take,
Secrets,
the most
regrets,
boring story to fall
creatures.
asleep to.
Last spring, someone
This is
said a
it.
woman gave
An
birth
old
to a
peasant,
baby with a goat's
sitting by the
eye.
fire,
They say she
thinking
made a
about
deal
things
with a
no
spirit
one
at
else
midnight.
remembers.
You laughed when you heard it turn to
A
you like the
lifetime
woman
of avoiding
doesn't speak
torches,
anymore, and her house
taxes,
never has a fire.
wolves,
You shift under
whispers,
the blanket. The flea
and
bites
dreams that don't
burn
belong to you.
worse when you
It's
sweat.
not dramatic,
That's how it gets in through the skin.
but it's
No
true.
one really knows
And yet,
how the plague
sometimes
spread.
you catch
But
yourself
some
smiling
nights, you think you can feel it
at the sound of a
crawling.
kettle
The most
boiling,
interesting
at the way your
history
sister
stories
mutters in
might
her
be
sleep about
pigs and
apples,
crowns. But your story is
at the
this.
familiar creak of your
A
own
scratch,
bones,
a
because
cough,
somehow
a candle
you're still
flickering
here,
low, and the quiet knowledge that
still
if you
waiting for
die in your
morning,
sleep,
still
your body
listening.
might not be found until morning.
Still you.
Even then, it might
You
be
lie
buried in a
down,
mass pit without
bones
your name.
cracking like
Hear the
dry
rooster.
branches.
False alarm, it's too early. But the
You don't
village
expect
will
to
stir
sleep
now.
well, but you'll
Someone will
try.
check the fire. Someone else will step
Because
out to the
even after
latrine and mutter a
everything,
curse at the frost.
You
You're
still believe the
alive
morning
for
will
now.
come,
The scratching
even if the
stopped.
night makes
Or
you
maybe
earn
it
it.
didn't. You just don't care anymore.
The rooster crows.
Tomorrow might
Too
be
early.
better, or worse. Doesn't
You
matter.
blink into the dark,
Morning is always a
confused,
kind of miracle. You close
then
your
annoyed.
eyes just a little.
That bird's
Candles
supposed to be
out.
your alarm,
3 toes.
not your
Silence.
tormentor.
You
Your
lie
sister
still,
sits up,
heart thudding,
squinting
the church
toward the
bell never
window.
rings at this hour unless
Is
something's
it
gone very wrong.
time?
It goes across the fields like a bad
You
omen
listen.
wrapped in fog. You don't breathe.
No other sounds,
You just listen.
no
1
clatter of
toe
kettles,
for a man, 2
no
for a
footsteps
woman,
on frost.
3 for a child. You
Just that
swallow
one
hard.
solitary
The air
cork.
feels different now, thicker, like it's holding its
Proud
breath with
and
you.
wrong.
You remember what
No,
happened
you
last
mutter,
time the
rubbing
bell
your
rang
eyes.
like
The
that.
idiot's
3
early.
toes. And the next morning,
You flop
half
back
the
down
village
onto the straw
vanished into
mattress, but the
quarantine.
damage is
The
done.
dead house, they call
Your
it.
brain's
But
awake
no
now.
one leaves flowers.
You sigh.
No one
The
even
rooster
whispers
crowed before
prayers
dawn.
anymore. You curl your fingers
Again.
into the straw
That makes
mattress.
3
It's
times this
damp
month.
and warm from shared bodies. Someone
Bad
next to
sign.
you coughs.
In your
It's
world,
probably
time
just
is
the smoke
elastic.
from the fire. Probably.
There
There's
are
a
no
saying in
clocks.
your village. If
No
the bell
wrist
rings
watches.
after dark,
Just
don't open
sun
the
and
door.
shadow,
You didn't used to believe in
breath
that
and
sort of
guesswork,
thing. But now,
and chickens.
you lock the door. You
Of
wedge a
course.
broomstick between
The rooster is how the village
You
knows
even
when to
place
rise,
garlic above the lintel.
when to pray,
Not for vampires, no
when to
one
fetch
believes in
water.
those, but because old Nan said it
So
keeps
when the
spirits
rooster
from
lies,
slipping under
the village
threshold.
panics.
You don't
Last
question
time it
old
happened,
Nan. She
the
survived
baker
2
started his
plagues in a
dough
drunk
2 hours
woman.
too soon and
Besides,
burnt the
it
entire
smells better
batch.
than a latrine. A baby starts
Before that,
crying in
someone
the next
declared a
household,
false
but
Sabbath,
thin
and the priest
walls
gave a sermon
mean
in the
shared
dark,
nightmares.
fell off
You
the
hear
pulpit,
mother mutter
broke his
soft
thumb,
shushing sounds, probably
called it
rocking
a
him back
sign
and
from
forth
God.
over and over.
And the
You
time
heard
before that,
stories of babies who didn't make it
old
through the
Henri
night,
died.
not because
In
of
his sleep,
sickness,
sure,
but because their
but still,
mothers were too tired,
they blamed the
too
rooster.
broken, too terrified.
Then they
People
blamed
don't
Henri
talk
for
about
listening
those
to it.
babies, but
You sit up
see
and
the
stare at the
holes
thin
behind the
thread of
chicken
not
coop.
quite
You
light coming
stare
through the
up at
shutters.
beams above you. Once, a
It's
man hanged
unsettling,
himself from
this
one of those
not
after his wife
knowing.
died.
You
were
grew up
just a
tracking
kid.
time by
You
birdsong,
watched him cut him down.
firelight,
His tongue had
and
gone
the angle of your
purple.
own
You
shadow,
remember thinking it
and
looked
now
like
it
a
feels like the
plum.
world
You
has
never
skipped
ate
a
plums
beat.
again. Now you lie.
Like something's
there, stiff,
off.
barely
You
blinking,
remember the
just
rhyme.
waiting for the next sound.
First crow,
A scream,
false
a knock,
glow,
a cough that
second
doesn't
crow,
stop. It's
heart
strange
slow,
how you can be
third
exhausted
crow,
and still too scared
souls
to
go.
sleep.
Kids
That's
used to chant it while
peasant life
jumping
for you.
rope.
You work until your hands bleed.
You used to laugh.
Eat until you're
Now,
half
not so
full,
much.
Then lie in bed, terrified
Historians
of
still
silence.
debate whether
The
medieval
death
peasants had a
toll
firm
is
concept
rising.
of
You
linear
heard it
time.
in the market
You could
yesterday.
answer that
That
easily.
scribe from 3 towns over
No,
far.
time
So
isn't a
was the
line.
diner's
It's a
wife.
circle.
They say she boiled his boots to feed
A
the
loop of
kids.
chores,
You do
hunger,
the same.
hope,
Or worse,
fear,
there's that
sleep.
farmer whose goats dropped
Repeat.
dead all at once.
You live by
Probably not
seasons,
plague,
not minutes,
probably just bad luck.
by
Still,
gut,
no one's
not
spoken
calendar.
to him since.
So when something breaks
Even
the rhythm,
priest is scared
it breaks
now.
you.
You've seen him flinch when someone
Your mother
sneezes.
wakes
You
now.
watched him burn incense
She looks at
until
the fire,
chapel filled with
then the
smoke
window,
thick enough to choke
then
the
at you.
rats out of hiding.
Again she
You
asks.
coughed in there once. People step
You
away.
nod. She doesn't say anything else. Just starts tying her scarf. Like it's an omen she already expected.
Others thought it was punishment.
You hear
from
someone
God.
outside.
But
Lise.
in your world, it doesn't matter.
Of course.
Truth
She's calling
doesn't stop
softly,
people from
trying not to
dying.
wake everyone,
A girl in the next town
but
over
also
said she
very
saw
clearly
death
trying to
itself
wake
walking
everyone.
between houses, touching doors.
Someone
Just
tell
a
the
tall
reeve.
figure in a dark
She
cloak.
says, knocking
People
on
called her
doors.
a liar. Then her parents
The rooster
died.
crowed early
No
again.
one called her anything after that.
Might
You
be
don't
a
wanna
sign.
sleep.
You imagine the
Sleep is
reeve
when
sighing
the
into his
plague
morning
comes.
mead?
You've heard the stories. People
It
go
is
to
a
bed
sign
fine,
of
wake
chickens
up
being
with
chickens.
black spots under
But it
their
doesn't
arms
matter.
and die by nightfall.
The village
You've
needs
also
meaning
heard
like a baby
quiet
needs
whispers
milk.
go on. No
You
one
step
says out
outside.
loud. That some
Blanket
don't even
wrapped
wake up
tight
at all.
around your
They
shoulders.
die dreaming. And
The
that's
cold
the
cuts
kind
through
of
it like
step
it's
you
made
can
of
hope for.
cobwebs.
So you stay
The air
awake,
smells
just
wrong
in
wet,
case. Just in
like a
case
storm
the
that
night
changed
still
its
turns a
mind
wake-up
halfway
coffin.
through.
A candle flares to life in
The rooster
neighbor's
struts
window.
proudly
You
on his
see the
perch.
silhouette of a woman
Smug,
with her arm
innocent,
trembling,
loud.
her shoulders hunched. Then another shadow
You stare
joins
at
her.
him.
They don't
He
speak.
stares
Then
back.
The candle goes out. You wonder
You
if
don't
she's
blink.
the one who rang the
Someone
bell.
mumbles a prayer behind
Outside,
you.
something howls.
Then someone
Not
else
a wolf
repeats it.
goes along,
Then,
but a dog, probably,
like a virus,
or a grieving man.
the whole
Or a
street starts
grieving man
whispering
who
the same
sounds like a
lines.
dog. You've heard both.
Protect
Neither
us
is
from
easy to
false
forget.
dawn.
You remember when
Keep
your
our
own
time
brother
tied to
got
truth.
sick. It
Let the
started with
sun
a
know our
headache.
names.
Then
You mumble it
chill.
too.
Then he
Not
vomited
because you
black
believe it,
stuff onto the dirt
but because
floor.
not
You
saying
thought he
it
might
feels
pull
riskier
through.
than joining in.
The worst part wasn't losing him.
You remember
It's how
last
fast your
year,
parents
during
forgot
the
to say his
solstice,
name. You
when the
sit up
days
in the
grew too
dark.
short and
Your
people
back
thought the
aches.
sun might
You're
never come
17,
back.
but
Children
you're
cried.
50. You reach for the little
The
cloth
priest made a
bag
new
under
holy
your
day.
bed and dried
Someone
herbs
painted
from
their
the healer's
face
daughter.
with ash
Supposed to
and
protect
danced in the
against
square at
fever.
midnight.
They just smell like hay. And
They say
regret.
that person
You
never
old, and
blinked
anyway,
again.
something
You think
the
about that a
ritual
lot.
helps. Pretending you can do
The sky
something
brightens
helps.
slightly now.
It's not much,
Real
but
dawn.
it's all you've got. Then you hear it again.
Finally, everyone
Just one
relaxes.
ring this time.
Just a
Then
little.
silence.
The rooster
worst
flaps
kind of
down and goes
silence.
quiet.
You lie back down.
You
whisper the
exhale,
same prayer you
but a
said
part of
for
you
weeks.
still feels unsteady.
You don't know if it worked. You don't know if
Because
anyone
once time
listened.
starts
But maybe
slipping,
that's not the point.
you never quite
Maybe
trust
the
it
point
again.
is saying it
You go
anyway.
back
Saying
inside.
it because if you don't, you
Pull
might
your
lose
blanket
more
tighter.
than your life.
Try to
You
recapture
might
the
lose
last
your
threads of
hope.
sleep,
You close your eyes.
but your brain's
The fire's
spinning,
out.
thinking
The
of
candle's
false
cold.
starts,
The scratching
of
is
broken
stopped.
rhythms,
Tomorrow will come.
of days that don't begin right,
But
and how nights
tonight,
follow them
you
like a
made it to
drunk
the
shadow.
end. It wasn't the stolen hug that
The
hugged
most
me,
boring
Doc.
story
It
to
was
fall
a text
asleep to.
message. I still
Maybe.
think of you, even when I'm with my wife.
But not
I
when
read
time
it one
itself plays
morning earlier
tricks.
this week,
Not when the
after
birds lie.
David had gone to work, and I was
Not when
clearing
you're
out some
never
old
sure
equipment
whether
in
the day
shed.
has really
It was a
begun,
laptop he'd used 3 years
or if
ago,
you're
which
just
no longer
dreaming
worked
again.
smoothly and was now
You
in
close your
storage.
eyes.
But I wanted to clear out some stuff.
This time,
because every time
you
I
don't dream
opened
of
the shed
witches,
door, I
or
felt
plagues, or torches.
claustrophobic.
Just
like
clocks.
my life right now. I decided
Melting,
to wipe the data
ticking in
and
reverse.
take the machine to a local electronics
Laughing,
recycler.
maybe,
But when I turned
or
it
maybe
on,
that's just the
screen
rooster.
displayed a slight error message. Then
One
automatically
candle
opened
left.
an old Google Drive
That's what your mother
folder
says as
that
she
had been
rummages
synced
through
from
the
David's
storage jar
account.
with
And
shaking
inside,
fingers.
there was a file with no name.
Just one
Just a
stub,
string of
half
dates.
waxed.
2023
Wick bent like a crooked tooth.
_07
Enough for maybe an hour of
28.
light, if you stretch
I
it.
wasn't looking for it, but there it was.
You're the one who has to light it tonight.
And I
The
clicked on
honor,
it,
if you can
reading
call it
inside
that, has
was a
fallen
backup
to
of a
you
conversation
ever since
hundreds
your
of
hand
lines
stopped
long. I
shaking,
don't know why David
and your
saved it,
eyes
baby.
adjusted to the dark
He
better than
accidentally turned on
hers.
automatic backups. But
You
what I
strike
saw
the
was
flint,
the fragments of
catch a
clear,
spark,
undeniably
and
illicit
watch the
affair.
flame come
The
alive.
woman was named Tuesday.
Small
I didn't
and
know her
nervous,
real name, but the nickname sounded
it flickers,
youthful and
like it knows this is its
suggestive
last
and completely out of
performance.
place in the world
And
of a
somehow,
50-year-old
the whole
man
room
with a
feels
wife
smaller
and a
when it
job
glows.
about to start college. I wish
You
last
sit with it
night
at the
had
center
been
of the
longer.
floor.
I can't take
Your
my
sister
eyes
beside
off
you.
Even though my
Your
wife
mother
is
curled
sitting
up
right
like a
next
cat
to
in the
me.
corner,
When you wore that
and
red
Grandma
dress,
barely
I couldn't
breathing.
breathe.
Her
I
mouth
read
hanging
every
open like she's
line,
still
every
waiting for
word,
someone
as
to
if
finish a
reading the
sentence.
verdict on my
You
own
listen to the
life.
quiet,
I didn't scream.
not because it's
I didn't
comforting,
smash the
because it's
computer.
familiar.
I just sat there in the dim light
This
of
is
the
your
warehouse,
last night as a
clutching
child.
wireless mouse.
You're not
My
sure when
eyes
it started
burning,
this
but
sense
not
of
a drop
finality,
water
but it's
coming out.
there,
I had suspected.
thick in
I
your
had
chest,
felt. I had a hunch.
like
but
ash.
The feeling of facing the truth was no
You
less.
look around and
It was
realize
like a
you've grown
punch
old
to
in
the
this room.
chest, but it
Older than you
didn't
should
leave a
be.
bruise, but a cold
Not in
wound
years, maybe,
stretching from my
but
neck
in where?
down to my lower
In nights?
abdomen. I
In
printed
fear?
out the chat,
You've watched
the
too
full
many
text,
people vanish
not
into the
because
dark.
I wanted to confront
Some
him,
to
but
death,
because I needed confirmation that I
others to
wasn't crazy,
madness,
that I wasn't wasn't imagining
Some
this,
just
that this truth
walked into the woods and
existed.
never
I
came
go back
back.
to recent conversations I had with
And
Davy
through it all,
Shalhoub,
this candle
lackluster,
stub, this
and
tiny,
seemingly
pathetic
innocuous
flame, is the
phrases like, "Don't
bravest
wait
thing
for me
you've
for
ever
dinner,"
owned.
or, "I am
You
on a
remember
business trip,"
stories.
now playing in my head.
You remember every sound that once terrified you, the howling, the scratching, the knock at the door, and how most nights, the real horror wasn't what was out there.
But I didn't want to say anything.
It was what your mind made in here. Historians still debate whether fear was more cultural or circumstantial. You could answer that. It was both. Fear grew in the fields with your potatoes. It curled in your blanket. It sat in your spoon like a lump of uncooked flour. It wasn't always loud, but it was persistent. Just like hunger. Just like winter.
But inside me,
you poke the candle with a stick. It dances again.
I no longer wanted to make him
you try to smile, not because anything is funny, but because you've made it to this moment, and that matters. You've survived long enough to see your own bones change shape. You've outlived the ones who taught you fear. Now you carry it for them. You hear footsteps outside. You don't panic. You don't even flinch. You just tilt your head and listen. Soft steps, measured, someone heading toward the chapel, maybe, or walking a midnight circle to shake off a bad dream. No boots, no horses, no torches, just one soul moving through the dark. Your sister mumbles something. Her hand finds yours. She doesn't wake, but she knows you're there.
And set a password.
That's enough. You sit a while longer, the candle melting into a puddle that looks like a map of your village. Bent edges, spilled borders. You think about all the things that never made it into books. The smell of mildew-soaked blankets. The shame of lice. The laughter that cracks open at the worst possible times. The way even terrible stories become comforting when they're repeated enough. You close your eyes. Let the candle do its job. Let the shadows crawl a little closer. Let the night try again. You're not afraid anymore. Not of spirits. Not of lords. Not even of silence, because you've known it too long. And silence, if you let it, becomes an old friend who just doesn't talk much. The candle flickers, then dies. And in the dark, you smile, because you remember the stories. And the stories remember you. The fire's out now. The room is still. The night no longer heavy with threat, but soft with memory. Everything moves slower here. Thoughts drift like smoke from yesterday's coals. You've made it. The stories have been told. The shadows explored. The fears walked through one step at a time. And here you are still breathing. You don't feel brave. You just feel tired. But in the best way. The way old wood feels under your hand. The way a worn path knows your steps. The way a familiar voice sounds when it says good night. So take a breath. Let your shoulders sink just a little deeper into the mattress or pillow, or wherever your body is resting right now. Let your thoughts unravel, like a thread pulled gently from a spindle. Let the stories blur. Let the flickering images fade into softness. No more coughing. No more scratching. No more hooves on the road. Only quiet and cold wind on a shutter that holds. And the sound of your heart, steady as an old song. If you're still awake, that's okay. You're safe here. This night belongs to you now.
You have no idea.
From somewhere far away, maybe past the trees, maybe just inside your chest, a voice says, "You made it to morning." And with that,